meeting and the special meeting that we had on August 30th, both the work study session with the Humboldt Board and also the study and voting session that we had following that. Any corrections to the minutes? All right.
Move that we approve the minutes from the regular study and voting session meeting of August 2nd, 2022. The HUSD PUSD joint work study session meeting of August 30th, 2022, and the special study and voting session meeting of August 30th, 2022 as presented.
A second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes of all three meetings as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Unfortunately, at this point in the program, we were scheduled to recognize Dr. Connie Donovan, who had to leave the board this summer for personal reasons. She was here until 2 minutes ago, but she was not feeling well, so she's left. So we will reschedule her for another time. So the next item for recognition is our counselors and character coaches.
Yay.
We didn't used to have that end of the table closed off. And I don't want to climb over it. All right. As most of you probably know, we have each month this year been recognizing one of our employee groups from PUSD because we have such terrific employees. We want to make sure that they all know that they are appreciated and loved. So this month we are recognizing our counselors and character coaches. So this week I took a look at PUSD's Portrait of Graduate. If you've never seen it, this is what it looks like. This was put together several years ago by the community. The people from all walks of the community got together to put this together and to decide what we wanted our graduates to look like, what characteristics we wanted them to exhibit. Of the 25 or so traits that are on this sheet, we said that we want our graduates to exhibit all of them. 15 of them directly relate to skills either built or enhanced by our school counselors and character coaches. Certainly, we expect all of our PUSD staff to help instill these characteristics and to develop such characteristics as confidence, compassion, persistence, respect, among a variety of others. But we also rely on our counselors and character coaches to support that development and to provide support and training to our other staff. These members of our PUSD team provide a variety of supports to our students, everything from offering behavior guidance in locations such as the cafeteria or the playground or other areas, all the way up to assisting them with post-high school planning preparation. They are essential to the positive development of our students, and we thank them for their work. At this time, I would like all of you in this category to come up here, please. All right, at this point, what I would appreciate is if each of you would tell us your name, your school, and your position. Not the
second one, the student well-being coach at PHS and director for the district.
Dr. Dan Bellara, behavior specialist for the district.
John Stewart, school counselor, Prescott High School, and Mile High Middle School.
Sarah Monaco, therapist at the high school.
Tom Sign, therapist at Mile High School.
Thank you all. We have certificates for each school, and if you would take them back to your schools and share them with the rest of the people in your school. You may need to speak up about which school you're at, since they go behind you and may not be able to find you.
Mile High.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's true.
Thank you all for coming.
Yep.
No, this is, it's not on YouTube.
Thank you.
That was last name.
Oh my goodness, is that gonna happen? Is that
I know, it's so. Let me see if I can pull it up.
All right. The next item on our agenda this evening is our instructional minute with Kelsey Seacourt.
Hi, good evening, everyone. We have some very exciting things happening with curriculum this year. We're looking at adopting both social studies and science curriculum within this school year.
Thank you.
We have started the process for social studies already this year. Our goal is to work on that this semester, and then next semester we will look at starting the process for science curriculum. And this is K-12 across the board. So this is very exciting. I've been in this district for 14 years, and this is the first time that I can remember that we've looked at curriculum K-12. So it is very, very exciting. Here's a little bit about the timeline that we are on. We have the social studies committee meetings, and we've had 2 of them already. So the first meeting was on the 26th of August, and at that time we came together and talked about what are our priorities, what are the things that we want to see from a social studies curriculum. So all of those teachers, community members, board members, parents came together and said, here are all of the things that we want in a social studies curriculum. Then we took the 6 options that we have and really started to dig into each one of those to find out, do these curriculum meet the priorities that we had set out for a curriculum for our district. And then we got together last Friday after they'd had a chance to spend some time going through each curriculum, analyzing that with the rubric, and talking about where do all of those land? What are the strengths of each program? What are the areas of concern? What are the questions that we still have around each of those curriculums? And then our great staff came together and said, we can narrow it down to a couple of options, and I can show you those here in a second. But we'll get together again on the 23rd to talk about what they've learned through that process. They were going to sample a couple of different lessons from each curriculum to see what is it like when you're really using that in a classroom with your students. And then we will make a final decision. Hopefully at that time we'll be ready. A large textbook company, Core Knowledge, is solely an online curriculum. Social Studies School Service is an online curriculum. Houghton Mifflin is also a large textbook company. And TCI is a really interesting mix of online components and physical materials for social studies. During our meeting last week, the committees, after going through all of those rubrics, there were 2 of these curriculums that really stood out. And so we were able to narrow it down to both McGraw-Hill and TCI. And what I thought was really interesting is that was not just a single group who had that feeling. Really interesting is that was not just a single group who had that feeling. K-12, everybody unanimously said these are the 2 that we want to explore further. So their next steps are to trial these, to implement lessons within their classroom, and then to also go through the planning process. What would this look like to implement a unit in one of these social studies curriculums? Now, our committee is very comprehensive. So we have 6 teachers from K4. We have 6 teachers from K8 and 6 of our high school teachers who are part of that. We also have 6 instructional coaches. We've got 4 administrators, 3 parents, and 2 board members. So we really wanted to make sure that we were getting everybody's perspective as a part of this committee. Now, the better part is that because there's such a big digital component to each of these, we were able to share digital access with all of our teachers. And so we allowed anybody who, even if they weren't on the committee, a chance to review these. So teachers across the board have had a chance to look at these and provide some input. So it's been a really interesting process, and I'm really excited to see what the outcome is. But in the end, I'm very confident that we are going to have a really comprehensive curriculum that meets all of our needs, K through 12. So are there any questions that I can answer for you?
Kelsey, are these corporations or organizations, do they understand the Arizona standards and what needs to be included in the units and the lessons that are presented?
Great question. So that was one of our top priorities, is that each of these have to align to Arizona standards. And we know that Arizona standards don't always align with national standards. That is an interesting piece of, our Arizona curriculum. However, what we are finding is the ones that we've narrowed it down to, yes, they do.
Okay.
There are some of these that do not. There are some that even at certain grade levels don't align, but the rest of them did. So we had to take that into consideration. But the ones that we are looking at do align with our Arizona standards.
Thanks.
Perhaps the standard alignment is the answer, but I'm curious if you could elaborate. You mentioned that McGraw-Hill and TCI stood out to the group. Could you elaborate on why?
It goes back to that standard piece.
Okay.
What we found is that some of these other curriculums were great curriculum, but 3rd grade didn't match our 3rd grade standards. There are some that were entirely flipped, and we couldn't piece them together in a way that was cost effective or that was best for planning and preparation on a teacher's part. So that was the thing that we looked at with both of them.
Are we looking for K through 12 with just one curriculum, or are they considering splitting it up?
We are considering splitting it up. And it comes down to the standards piece again. So what we found is, I can use TCI as an example. They don't have a 4th grade curriculum. They wouldn't even send us digital access. They wouldn't send us physical copies because they don't have anything that aligns with our standards. So we are looking at that still to see if we could piece that together. What that would require is taking part of 5th grade and part of 6th grade curriculum and combining them to meet our 4th grade standards. So we are asking for K4 or K5 to use the same curriculum, 6, 7, and 8 to use the same curriculum, and then high school to use the same curriculum, so that we have alignment there. But we will have to work, if we do choose different options for those different grade levels, we will have to
Put on these, is there an opportunity then for members of the public to bring forward ideas that as long as they fit with the Arizona standards, to bring forward ideas that could possibly be incorporated that might not be included in these curricula?
Are you referring to like instructional strategies or different topics, ideas, content to bring in?
Different ideas, maybe supplemental ideas to what's being taught that might not be something that would be thought of from your committee or a certain teacher or anybody like that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
There's tons of options out there as far as what we could teach from. We're limited as far as curriculums. There's all kinds of alternative sources and different resources out there. But yes, absolutely. And what we find is, yes, they're aligned for the most part to our standards, but we might find that there's a couple standards that are not taught the way that we would like them to be. So we will have to supplement those in a couple areas, but not a lot. The ones that they've narrowed it down to are very aligned with our standards.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Any other comments, questions? Thank you,
Okay.
Kelsey.
Thank you.
Is Teresa coming?
Yeah.
The next item on our agenda is our presentation from Granite Mountain. Each month, we have one of our schools present their trilateral goals and how things are going for them, so.
I know she had to take her daughter to an appointment in Phoenix today, and I'm wondering if she got caught in the storm or something, so.
That could
But
be.
she was ready. We have her
Okay.
presentation. She was planning on it.
I'm going to suggest that we, yeah, if she makes it, we add her in where we have time, okay? All right. Next item on the agenda is the PUSD nurses program. Marty?
Nice.
I'm sorry. I was focused on Teresa. What am I talking about?
Nurses.
Oh. Okay, I'm ready for this one. We have our fabulous nurses here, and before we have them come up to the mic and talk about their program, I do want them to stand up, all of you, because we have almost all of them here, and have them introduce themselves. We're very fortunate to have certified nurses in our schools, and they do an amazing job. And when you hear this presentation, you're going to know why we need them. So, Brenda, do you want to start?
My name is Brenda Phillips. I'm the registered nurse.
Do you want to come up to the
Sure.
podium?
I can
and
be louder too.
Feel free
Very big voice.
feel free to pull it down. Thank you,
All right.
ma'am.
My name is Brenda Phillips, and I'm the school nurse at Mile High Middle School. This is my 4th year there.
Oh my gosh.
I'm Carolyn Ernst, and this is my 17th year as the nurse at Prescott High School.
I'm Michelle Kolb, and I'm a registered nurse at Taylor Hicks, and this is my 3rd year with Prescott Unified.
Hello, everyone. My name is Esmeralda Etidor. I'm the first school nurse for my job at Lincoln Elementary.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jean Marie Mead, and I am in my 4th year at Taylor Hicks as their Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday registered nurse. Michelle and I job share. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mai Nguyen, and I've been at Granite Mountain School as a school nurse for 8 years. Thanks for having us.
And the only one missing is Wendy Farnsworth from Abiajet. Carolyn, do you want to talk to us?
I'll start off.
All right.
I thought I'd just start out with a brief history of school nursing. In 1893, a young nurse named Lillian Wald found herself appalled with the sanitary and health conditions of children and families in the New York City slums. In response to this, she created the Henry Street Settlement to bring health care to those in need. As such, Lillian became the first public health nurse. In 1902, she proposed to the New York City Board of Education placing a nurse in one school for 1 month to see if children's health improved, thus improving attendance and educational success. The program proved so successful that after 1 month, the board placed a nurse in every school in the district. Lillian also initiated the first school lunch program and developed it in a way that children would not feel stigmatized. In 1904, an interesting tidbit, she hired a teacher, Elizabeth Farrell, to teach kids who were considered unteachable and incorrigible. Elizabeth created the first ungraded classroom, and that was the beginning of special education.
Wow.
Nurses are the only professionals licensed to care for the physical, psychological, intellectual, social, emotional, and spiritual aspects of their clients. So you get the whole shebang with us. Our ongoing duties may include the following. We review immunization records for compliance and state reporting, vision and hearing screenings and report to the state. I do about 700 a year. We give out daily prescription medications, as needed medications. We assess sore throats, colds, strep, COVID, identifying communicable diseases such as chickenpox, reporting those to the county. And here I've inserted COVID, as it's been for the last 2 years, which is dying down. We provide diabetes management, central line care, tube feedings. We help children who, excuse me, experience migraines, asthma, injuries, cuts, sprains, broken bones. We deal with students who have panic attacks, anxiety attacks, and post-traumatic stress disorder. We have students that have seizures, concussions. We can advise if a student should return to class, go home, or see the doctor. We hook up children with no insurance to programs like Partners for Healthy Students to provide them free access to medical care. We complete welfare checks to evaluate students suspected to be under the influence of drugs or alcohol or have potential other medical issues and help guide them into the right level of treatment. We are your homeless liaisons. We assist students with chronic medical issues to obtain chronic medical forms and consent, and also navigate those who need homebound services. We participate in 504 medical planning and IEP meetings. I wanted to give some specific examples of my 17 years at school. I don't know if any of you were here at the time, perhaps Adam was teaching, but I had a young man run into my office who said a teacher collapsed in class. And when I arrived, he was on the floor, he had no pulse. The police officer and I initiated CPR. I had someone get the AED, and I had to deliver shocks. And I got him back for 7 minutes. I rode in the ambulance with him while he coded for 10 times. I met with his parents at the ER, and I went back with his father where he said, it's time to end life support. And I kissed him on the forehead. And the last words I said to him for those 7 minutes I had him, I said, we love you, all of us. And he said, thank you. So that was the hardest, but also maybe the most special. I've had students present with pulmonary embolisms, blood clots to the lungs from untreated cellulitis. I've had students with first onset of seizures. We had one last year. He turned purple after 30 seconds. First seizure ever at 16 years old. I helped his mom navigate getting rescue medicines from his primary care doctor even prior to him being evaluated by a neurologist. We deal with recurrent seizures. I've treated students with seizures from overdoses on antidepressants. I've treated students with Tylenol overdoses, which can be fatal. I've treated students with opioid overdoses at the high school. I've assessed students who've ingested Jimson weed pods and hallucinate, and their vital signs go through the roof, and we sent 3 students to the hospital that one day. I've assessed and cared for students multiple times with alcohol poisoning, which can be fatal. On the other hand, I've had students running into my office drunk because they knew it was a safe place to come. I treated the fire captain who fell off the roof when he was assessing a fire alarm, and treated him for potential head injury, and he had a severely dislocated shoulder. I've had students present with migraines for the first time where they look like they're having a stroke and their whole side is paralyzed, and to talk to the parent and get them to the ER and assessed properly. I've had students having flashbacks of being raped and just holding them and saying, you're safe for an hour until those flashbacks stopped. I've had students with recurrent fainting episodes and helped the parents navigate through Phoenix Children's to identify a rare fainting syndrome. We manage students with cystic fibrosis, anaphylactic reactions. I did urinary catheterizations every day for 2 years on a student. I've dealt with students who have accidentally cut off their fingertips. And this is the one we always laughed at, but we had 2 special ed students, severely impaired, come running into my office. They had got caught having sex on campus, and they came in individually. And the young lady got pregnant. She went into labor in my office. We were able to keep her in school and work with her throughout the process. But again, they had a safe place to run when they got caught. I took care of a boy who was in a fight. He was highly intoxicated, being restrained, and he had an implanted defibrillator. And that's a pretty scary situation because he's uncontrolled, having alcohol poisoning, and he just punched another student. We've assessed and reported abuse to DCS. We see students with rare syndromes. I've had two students with muscular dystrophy, one who came to school 10 days before he died because he loved school. And he came in every day with his portable ventilator into my office. I had a boy with a rare syndrome where he bit off his fingertips and they had to remove all his teeth. It's a very, very rare syndrome. You think you won't see these kids, and we have them in the district. And he was such a neat young man. He had to be passively restrained in his wheelchair so that he couldn't bite his hands anymore. I had a young man in the transition room with an unknown genetic disorder. He was from India. Dad had no green card. We knew there were some genetic issues, but he deteriorated pretty quickly over 2 weeks. And I met with Terry Gorman, the SPED director, and we called in his aunt and uncle who gave care for him. And I got hospice in place for that student. And we provided hospice care at the school for him because he loved school. And he came to school about 10 days before he died. I have students with suicidal ideations, suicide attempts on campus, students affected by suicides of friends or family members, students who self-harm or who come to the nurse because their friend is committing self-harm and they know we'll deal with it in a kind and compassionate manner. I've had students with the initial onset of psychosis and paranoia and helping the parent to navigate the psychiatric community. I've had students with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. Another one that stands out, and I wish John Stewart were here, was a young man, and when John enrolled him for school, he said, if you ever need anything, please come to me. And one day, the student went to John, and John came and got me. The young man was having thoughts of killing his teacher. And can you imagine being a 16-year-old boy with those types of thoughts? And we dealt with that child and his parents, and I don't know if it was Matt Dean at the time, and the principal, and we navigated him into the appropriate psychiatric care. We got him enrolled in the Genesis program, and he graduated from PHS. And that scenario could have gone way differently had we not been the people we are at PUSD. And last page. Most of the students we nurses see are able to be treated and returned to class, increasing attendance and educational input. Most importantly, the nurse's office is a safe haven for all, including staff. We have come a long way since Henry Street in 1900, which still serves the people of New York today. We are proud that PUSD values its students enough to provide this level of care that they may not otherwise receive. And we as your school nurses are honored to serve the 4,000 students who walk into our halls each day. And we each believe in our hearts that we have the best job in the world. Thank you.
Yes, I will say though, when the pandemic first started and we had our first nurse meeting, I said, are you guys excited about, being involved in the medical field during a pandemic? It's once in a lifetime. And they looked at me like I was insane. And, but Carolyn did say when we got the vaccinations and we were able to administer those, especially to some of the elderly who were very fragile, Carolyn said, now I'm having a good time. I'm emotional because of all the stuff you presented, so it's hard not to get choked up with all the things that you guys do for our kids. So thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn, and the rest of the nurses.
Sorry. All you contact criers, sorry about that.
Next, we'll have Principal Teresa Brusso talk to us about what's going on at Granite Mountain.
Thank you. Just to piggyback on that, I know my school nurse is absolutely invaluable. She is just an amazing asset, and yeah, we wouldn't have survived the pandemic without our nurses. You guys did amazing, amazing things. You helped keep our schools running and our schools healthy and safe as we possibly could. So thank you so much. Okay. So on to Granite Mountain. So this year, Granite Mountain is happy. Do I have the ability to move this? Okay, good. Okay. So Granite Mountain School, our vision is preparing today's students for tomorrow's opportunities, and that our mission is that we're partnering with parents, families, and the communities to prepare every student for success in a safe, academically innovative, and character-rich environment. And so 5th and 6th grade is such a vital time in students' lives. They are in that pre-adolescent phase, and sometimes I describe them as kind of St. Bernard puppies. Their bodies have grown. Their minds are not quite caught up with where their bodies are at. And so, yeah, so they're a really fun and unique age, and I've loved being there. This is my 8th year at Granite Mountain School. And Granite Mountain is a STEAM school, and we are continuing with that, actually moving full steam ahead with science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. We received at the end of last year a grant, a STEAM refocused grant from NAU. So we redeveloped a STEAM leadership team. We have monthly trainings. In fact, in a couple of weeks, they happen on Saturdays. I have a leadership team who participates in these meetings. We're revisioning what STEAM and STEM looks like at Granite Mountain and moving forward. And we have a new STEAM teacher this year who is just taking a new spin on it. We have some really exciting things happening. Currently on their Fridays, teachers get to sign up with our STEAM teacher. Our art teacher also participates in that. They've been working on propulsion and learning about propulsion, energy, and kinetics, and they were tasked with having to build a boat to design the propulsion, and so that's been going on for a few weeks, and students are super excited about it. And they're getting ready to work on a city planning project where they'll be break classes into 5 groups that'll focus on water management, electrical management, road management, and civil engineering, architectural management, and city inspectors. And then each team will have a vital role in their category, and they'll play a part in city planning. And then with our connection with Ellen Basher and her connections with the city, students will actually have an opportunity to even do presentations. So we're really excited about our students being involved in our community and what is happening at Granite Mountain School. And our trilateral plan, I will pass this out. Can you see it? Thank you. I'll pass out copies. I apologize, in the pouring rain, you might not be able to get one. There's about 10 copies. You might have to share.
I didn't want one anyway.
I made copies at school, and then I was in a meeting, and anyway, I left them on my desk that I'm scrambling trying to print them out at home. Anyhow, our trilateral plan is very similar to what we've done in the past. Our goal is that during the 2023 school year, 75% of our students will either meet or exceed minimum grade level proficiency or meet or exceed the growth expectation based on our Galileo pre and post math tests. And then we added this year through the intentional instruction of academic vocabulary in all academic areas. Academic vocabulary is vital to student understanding, and especially at this age. Students are tasked with having to compare and contrast. Well, what does that mean? They need to understand what that means. What does it mean to summarize? What does it mean to analyze? And so that is a big part of our instruction as teachers, teaching students what it means to carry out the tasks that they're being asked to do. And I won't go over all of these areas. I'm going to kind of summarize it for you. because I could take probably 30 minutes reading the whole thing, and you guys can take a look at it. But basically, our trilateral plan, as I know many of you have seen other schools' plans, it's broken into 3 areas. So we have school culture, data-driven systems, and whole child supports. In school culture, developing a culture of high expectations is really important. And at Granite Mountain School, because we are only a 5th and 6th grade school, 50% of our student population is new to us every single year. So developing culture, who we are, what our expectations are, what does it mean to be a Granite Mountain Grizzly, what does it mean to be a 5th and 6th grader is really important. So we spend a lot of time really focusing on that. Capturing Kids' Hearts is a great structure that we utilize as part of that. Capturing Kids' Hearts is simply a program that sets up a framework to establish a positive classroom environment and positive relationships, so students know how to appropriately and respectfully interact with one another as well as with the teacher in the classroom. And so it's kind of the framework that we use for that. Basically, 5th and 6th grade, as we know, they're getting to be teenagers. We want our students to be good adults, good human beings, and that's really the essential basics of what we're working through in Capturing Kids' Hearts. And then one of the areas that we work on, and that is focus, just focusing on that and input, getting lots of input. We have 3 leadership teams at our school who provide input. Both we have a behavior leadership team, a data leadership team, as well as an instructional leadership team. And so all of our teachers are participating in leadership in some capacity and providing input for our school. In terms of our data-driven systems, are 3 areas of focus. Discipline, it's not discipline like behavior discipline. It's being disciplined to carry through and be committed to our structure and our plan, providing that order. In order to really be able to analyze data effectively, we have to have a good structure and plan in place, and then we need to monitor and evaluate that information on an ongoing basis and make improvements and adjustments as needed. And then whole child supports. One of the areas that we have at Granite Mountain School is being a change agent. So being willing to assess our environment. What do we need to change? What do we need to fix? What do we need to improve to help students succeed? That is our ultimate goal. Providing affirmations and rewards to students and staff, and then flexibility. We're dealing with children, we're dealing with students, and we have to come into the school being flexible each and every day. So that's a summary.
I'm just going to interrupt Teresa. These terms that she's using are specific to trilateral planning, and so they have their own definitions. So it seems kind of weird that it just says focus. That's a trilateral term that has a descriptor of what that means in the school.
It's part of our balanced leadership training that all of our school leaders have gone through over the last couple of decades, actually, now.
And then our main focus areas for 2023, one of the big things that we did, and I spent time during the summer, is I readjusted our master's schedule and I increased our core instructional blocks. So for math and language arts, I increased instructional time for students. We realized that it's vital. We need more time. Teachers need more time for instruction in those areas. PLC stands for Professional Learning Community, and it's a structure on which teachers get together. They have a very structured format that they work through in terms when they're looking at data, and they work together. They all have to come prepared with their data and information, and they work through basically 4 questions. What are we teaching? What do we want students to know and understand? How do we know if students have learned it, and what are we going to do if they haven't? And so they work through that process. We do it about every 3 weeks. And so teachers come planned and prepared for that. And again, and then we have enrichment and reteach time embedded into our schedule. And so that's where a lot of our PLC things happen. And so the teachers will break up their classes into small group, whether they're providing enrichment for students who already understand the concepts they're working on, or small group instruction for students who need more support in that. And so it's structured. They have structured and focused expectations. They're working on power standard mastery during that time. And students are also monitoring their own progress during that time as well, and how they're doing on their own mastery of standards. And then again, building a positive school climate and culture, as I mentioned before. We want kids to come to school and feel safe. We want kids to come to school and want to learn, and we want kids to want to be there. And so all of those things are really important and play a vital part in learning. Any questions?
I have one, if you have a minute. So I know from Mile High to the high school, I believe there's a program called Badger Academy. Badger Boot Camp, maybe, where students are prepared to go to the high school.
Oh, no.
Is there something similar, I guess, with Granite Mountain to move them to 7th and 8th grade? Because I think there's a big difference once you reach 7th grade. That's a critical year for kids, and I just wonder, are you doing something specific to help students transition from Granite Mountain into that environment?
Right, so we do have transition. Actually, we work a lot with transition from 4th graders into 5th grade, and we, in fact, by February, we're going around. I have parent information nights where parents just come in, find out about Granite Mountain School. I will get to the other end of the spectrum. But parents come in, find out information about Granite Mountain. I do a school tour. I bring our music and present information on our electives. And I go around to each of the elementary schools with our music programs and share with them what they can expect at Granite Mountain. Then we do, about a month later, towards the end of February, a Greek Granite Grizzly Night, where students get to come and we break them into small groups and we send them on campus tours. Since we're a great outdoor campus, we have a fire pit. We usually light that up and have s'mores, and then get students and parents and families get to take small group tours around campus and ask questions. I ask lots of questions. I usually have 5th grade teachers who are heading that up so they can really provide them with some good information. And then our 5th graders at the very end of the school year, they come up for a 5th grade visit day, where we'll do kind of a mini spirit assembly, so they get to experience that. We do some fun field games. Again, they get to take tours, visit classrooms, they get to eat lunch at our school. And then in terms of 6th graders, we work in conjunction with Andy, and he does something very similar. He has a parent information night, and they offer school tours. I know Michelle Hoop, their counselor, comes in and has come and chatted with our classes and students. And what else do we do, Andy?
We do the big trip over there, campus tours, a lot of athletics that
Sure.
6th graders can be a part of 7th grade, just kind of get them used to it, lots of the clubs.
Yeah.
Okay.
So 6th graders do get to do a visit during the school day too, and go and visit Granite Mountain. And then we do have some sporting events that are in conjunction. So even though we typically run intramural sports, students can participate. They practice at Granite, but they get to compete with Mile High in cross country, track, and then wrestling. Our wrestlers are bussed over, and they practice with the Mile High students and obviously compete in their weight classes.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Is the student outcome, is this every year, or do you change the student outcome on your trilaterals?
We change it. We look every year at data. How did students do? Did we meet our goal? Did we meet our goal in all areas? And in some areas we did last year, but we didn't in all areas. So that specific goal, we kept it. We decided to keep it the same. We felt as a group. I had a leadership group analyzing that data and deciding upon that, and felt like we're not quite there. It still is a goal with high expectations, especially coming in after COVID. And so we kept it the same, but then we added that piece of academic vocabulary because we really want that instruction happening in all classrooms.
And could you just elaborate on that student outcome goal? Because there's a lot of conversation right now about proficiency, and I see that there's also the Galileo pre and post tests. So are you able to maybe just expand on why that goal and outcome is worded that way?
Okay. Yeah, and we add proficiency and we also add growth, because we can't control where students come in, but the end result is we need to see growth in students. And actually, as we get close to letter grades being distributed for schools, 50% of letter grades, unless they're changing the formula for this year, I don't know, but in the past, 50% of letter grades is based on student growth. And so they are monitoring how students have done from one year to another. And so Galileo is a standards-based test. At the beginning of the year, they take a test, whether it's 5th or 6th grade, based on state standards. It does an assessment. It's a standards-based criteria assessment. So we get a baseline data, know where students are at. That's how we place students in intervention or offer a variety of services, and how teachers know where they're at and where to start with. And then we're given a mid-year assessment, so we kind of know where they've been, if they've made growth, how they're doing, where are some of our weaker areas that we really need to focus on. And then we give a post-test at the end of the year, and that post-test will measure that growth piece. And typically that 75% mark, we will at least usually hit that in growth area. So.
And then my other question had to do, I saw and heard crystal clear that you increased the time in those core instructional, you increased the time that students were spending in core instructional time. And I'm curious if you could talk, since all of these are like a three-legged stool, and could you speak to how transferring some of that time there pairs with the time you spend doing things like character counts, focusing on that school culture, affirmations, etc.?
So a lot of the character counts piece, we actually have time. Fridays are a little bit funny because we release at 1 o'clock. Our students actually don't go to elective on Friday. They do have their same amount of instructional time for math and language arts on Friday. We have a time called connection circle time where they'll do class meetings. That's where our character lessons will also happen. We embed it to Friday, but we do make sure that we protect language arts and math time on Fridays especially. And if we can embed, if we have assemblies going, that's where we try to embed it, because we try not to make that impede on the school day. And then in terms of some of the elements of like capturing kids' hearts, that's 3 to 5 minutes at the beginning of each class where they'll spend just doing good things, getting the day started. It's part of not always morning, but it's part of the beginning of the class routine, and before they get into their instruction and bell work things. So,
thank you.
Other questions for Teresa? Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, next we have Renee Steingraber, our PUSD testing coordinator. She's going to talk to us a little bit about the scores that came out last week.
That suddenly and quickly came out this week. It was very eye-opening, actually last week in there. So first of all, thank you. It's actually nice to see a crowd here, to be able to listen in person and to actually hear some things. So to get you started, again, my name is Renee Steingraber, and I retired from Ohio schools after 31 years and came here. And so it's been really interesting to me to look at how Ohio dealt with some of the state tests, and I'm still learning what's happening in Arizona with the state tests. So to get you started, we are talking about the achievement assessments strictly today, and it is for our entire district. So we're not, we'll get into it and show you a little bit more. Just for your information, all the data that I'm showing you today is retrieved from the public site of the az.gov. You can go right to accountability and data, and you can pull a massive file with lots of raw data on it to try to decipher what it means. So in Arizona, and for PUSD, what we're required to give for our assessments are ELA assessments in grades 3 through 8, and those are called the AASA. Grade 9 takes the ACT Aspire. Grade 11 takes the ACT. And in math, we have grades 3 through 8, again, the AASA. Grade 11 ACT. And in science, we have grades 5, 8, and 11 take the AZ Sci. Grade 5 test covers grades 3, 4, and 5 curriculum. Grade 8 covers 6, 7, and 8 science curriculum, and grade 11 covers the high school curriculum for the grade 11 test. However, we don't have the results released for the AZ Sci, so I won't be sharing those with you today. One thing I do want to mention following Teresa, which I thought she stated very well about the Galileo, and also balanced leadership was mentioned in there. And so on the testing platform toward the very end of the school year, I can actually go in there and pull out the basic information of how our students have done. It hasn't been vetted by the state or gone through, so it's not released publicly, but we do get a mini picture of how our kids are doing, and then that data is pulled and given to the principals and district leadership at that time to kind of help them set their goals and just to give them a basis of where we think we're at. For the ELA and math, assessments, I think there's something to clarify, because there's a lot of misconception that, oh my gosh, every year they continue to change the whole test. And that's not quite clear. In 2015 to 2019, it was called the AZ Merit. And in 2020 to 2021, the state test was called the AZM2, AZ Merit 2. And then in 2022 to currently, it's called the AASA. And the major change in this test was who took it. In 15 to 19, it was all grades 3 through 11 took math, and it was end of course math at the high school, and then they took an ELA. In 2020, when we didn't have an actual test, it was supposed to be given in 2020 and 2021, it was changed to grades 3 through 8 and grade 10 only, as they were looking to change the test. And then currently, it's only 3 through 8. So the name of the test changed, but the test itself had minor changes to it. So all of them, the performance levels remain the same. They're called minimally proficient, partially proficient, proficient, and highly proficient. And since 2019, the cut scores have remained the same as well. The item bank remained the same, and I got this information by calling the state and talking to people in assessment. So I wanted to verify and make sure coming today how this is set up. You know, what are we trying to achieve here? So the item bank of questions remained the same, therefore most of the questions remained out of the same item bank. They always throw out a few questions every year, and they always bring a few new questions in. The testing platform did change. Formerly, we used Tide, and that vendor, the contract was up. And so we went to PAN, which is Pearson Access Next. AZ Sci has always been, to the best of my knowledge, through PAN, but now all of the tests are through PAN. There was a new writing bank created for Arizona students. When the state left the Tide system, they didn't get to take the writing samples to grade against or to compare to. So new writing samples had to be given. And last year, if you've heard about the field tests, we did a whole lot of extra testing, it felt like last year, like in January, in grades 3 through 8, where they did an extra writing piece. And the purpose of that was so that the state would have writing samples of Arizona students to grade against. And in 2020, there were no tests were administered at all. Okay? Any questions on that or clarifications?
So the state has cut back, you're not testing in high school at all?
We're testing the ACT and the ACT Aspire. They transitioned to ACT Aspire in 9th grade and ACT alone in 11th grade, which I'm glad you mentioned that brought that up because ACT, a lot of times I think we think ACT and SAT is given to college-bound students. It is the state required test for high school. So we test all students, even students who are in special ed classes, unless they have they're the alternatively assessed students, which is very few.
So did we test that at the end of last year?
Last spring was the first time, right, that was required by the state.
Those scores today or not yet?
We have minor bits of them released, so I'll share those with you.
Renee, can I
Yes.
clarify one other thing? So when you say the cut scores have been the same since 2019, so the last 3 tests in a row, they've said, okay, here's where minimally proficient is, here's where proficient is. But prior to that, it changed basically every year, is that correct?
I don't know if it did or not, but looking at the data, you know, you've been here longer than me, so I don't know that for a fact, but I do know that in 2019 was the last, if you look on the public site, you can see it was changed in 2019 and remains the same today. Yes, Deb?
So when we get scores like we got last week, all we get are percentage passed. We don't get minimally proficient, partially proficient, proficient, we don't get that breakout.
It is there. If you go to their hidden little website, you go to the data and you download the giant file. It is there. However, I have to say, and I'll show you in a second in our data, a lot of the data is redacted, and you'll see an asterisk in the columns. And what that traditionally meant was there were 10 or less students in that group, so they didn't want to break it down to identify them. However, in our 6th grade ELA, we have an asterisk. And we had like 264, 290 or something students there. So I have contacted the state, and I actually got an email about an hour ago that said they're redoing the public file and they will re-release it.
I see.
I don't know when. They didn't tell me when, but I did get one today about an hour ago that said they will be re-releasing that file for the state. So I had some real aha moments this week. And when, first of all, the data came out, we didn't know it was coming out already. You know, the last time I had checked, it was looking closer till November before they would actually release it publicly, that we could look at it. And so at a webinar that I attended on Friday, it seems like the whole state found it out the same way. So we've kind of put out there the communication that we need to know when it's coming out, so we can actually look at it. But one of the most telling things to me was thinking about the state assessment and looking at the scores of the assessment and thinking, wow, only 40%, you know, the state is at, or, you know, 20%. What's going on here in the state? And what I was told and what I learned is that it was an example that was given to me. For example, if a teacher teaches a lesson on Monday, then Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday, they review it. And then Friday, they give an assessment. And so the assessment, you expect those kids to have 80% or higher. Much of our testing platforms, 80% means mastery. And so that can be done in that short time. You can check and you can readjust. But the state test, and everybody says it, but it's just true, it's a one-time test, right? It's comprehensive. And it's the standards of the entire year. And when the state evaluates this test, they use a bell curve. So if you've been in education around long enough, I don't know if other people, I feel like I've been in it forever, but bell curve was always traditionally used like to grade assessments. And the reality in bell curves is that you're going to have a small amount at the lower end, and you are going to have a higher amount at a low point, but at the opposite end. And so the majority of the performers are going to end up between 40 and 60%. And this is what the state does with state assessments. That was an aha moment for me. I can't understand why we can't get to 80%. Why can't, you know, the whole district, why? But this was telling to me because, you know, we need to step back and kind of look at a little bit more reality. That doesn't mean we don't need to improve. But the fact is, most of the people in the state of Arizona are going to be at this level based on the curve.
Renee, can I ask a clarifying question? Would you mind going back to that previous slide really quick? So then, with minimally proficient and partially proficient, and proficient and highly proficient, we've got those four areas, and what gets termed as passing is students in proficient and highly proficient, correct?
Correct.
So given this data that go ahead.
I'm going to just hold you for 1 second.
Yeah.
This was just a quick Google, easy to look at
Sure.
slide. It's not anywhere on the website, but just to show the point of the bell curve.
Fair enough.
So I wanted to show that so that you didn't relate these to the state.
Absolutely, I appreciate that. But given what we're saying about bell curves, is it reasonable or fair to suggest that students who were right in the middle, just this side of the line, were failing students? Given that those on this side of the line are passing students? I think of those two as being a dichotomy.
But based on what you just asked, it is true that students that would be on the left side of the line
Sure.
would be considered failing if they are in the minimally proficient. And we do see that true in our scores. They might be 10 points off.
So the failing that I'm hearing here, though, is different than the failing that I'm used to in the real world, where,
Correct. Or you're in a teacher's classroom.
Gotcha.
And you're looking at how they're grading, or they're doing a module in math, or they're doing, they're working in a month on a concept, and they're reviewing constantly, and then you grade. Yes, teachers should expect, they want their kids to get up to mastery for that concept. But again, this is entire year. This is the entire year. It would be like after tonight, tomorrow, let's do a little quiz on what you learned tonight at tonight's meeting. And then tomorrow, let's do one of all of last year. And you tell us what you learned. The scores are definitely going to vary in there. So bringing us to the reality of what our scores look like in here, this is PUSD, I have a column, and the state pulls all of the ELA together in it, and we have 48% passing, and in math, this was 37%. When you look at just the ELA, we had an asterisk in grade 6, which meant the state did not give us the data. However, when you look at proficient and highly proficient, 45 is what I found. So I put the 45 in there to give us a number to actually look at, to keep in context of where we're at. And again, ACT, they gave us a number. I don't know if that's a bell curve or not. I discussed this with the state. However, they gave us a number for ELA, and yet the ACT is broken down to English. Adam, help me out here. English, reading.
Well, there's a reading, writing, math, and science component to the ACT.
So there's
scores are a little harder to understand. The scale scores out of 36, so it's a little different perspective. It looks like they tried to normalize this data so that it matched up with the way that the rest of the state organized theirs.
So-
Sorry, math teacher.
So on the ACT, then, what would you consider a proficient grade?
I've got that data from the state. If you don't, Renee, you may have it.
I do have some of
Go
it there,
ahead.
but it doesn't correlate to what we're showing here
Okay.
from the state, because as Adam said, it is to 36.
Yeah,
We got a 45.
Right.
Right? So we're in between, but I believe that Clark pulled some data this week, but with do you want to share that data? Do you have it in front of you?
Sure.
I have a printout of it.
I do. On July 11th, the Arizona State Board of Education sent to us the cut scores for the ACT test. I was able to do some research on what those meant and compare them to nationwide scores. So Renee's exactly right that Arizona requires all students to take this, so it's the entire spectrum of students, those who are college-bound and those who aren't. The same is true for 13 other states, but they're generally low population states, Wyoming, Vermont, Montana, et cetera. So most of the students who take, the vast majority of students who take the ACT nationwide are college-bound students. They're headed to college. This is their test to see how prepared they are. The 45% of our students were in proficient or highly proficient. For ELA, and we're looking at ELA right here. For ELA, the cut score was 19.6.
Okay.
How that compares with nationwide, again, largely college-bound students, the nationwide average for students on the English portion of the test, the ELA portion of the test, is 19. So you had to reach the average for college-bound students nationwide in order to not fail the ACT according to the state of Arizona, as far as how they set the cut scores this year.
And that's in Arizona, that's all students.
That's all students.
So
All
that's
students.
including the percentage of students that are not college-bound.
That's right.
That have not taken college-bound prep courses.
Right.
Okay.
And again, the statewide national average for the ELA is 19, and our cut score was 19.6.
Yeah.
So if you got 16 to 18 on the ACT, it's not a reason to throw a party, but it also doesn't mean that you failed.
Just as an anecdote, I think at Embry-Riddle, our minimum ACT score was a 19
Oh, very
at
interesting.
Embry-Riddle. So if you didn't have a 19, you weren't admitted to Embry-Riddle, which is a high-achieving university
Right.
for math and science.
And so if I'm hearing you correct, Clark, when our students and all the students in Arizona take it, to be considered passing, it's at that same level as what is actually higher by 0.6 points.
Yeah, higher than the national average.
For students that specifically are college bound. And what you're saying is.
That was our minimum.
That was the minimum that was accepted.
Right.
And that's all students taking.
If you're below that, you're in a conditional admission category, basically.
Okay.
So there were 10 nice people who sat in a room someplace and set these cut scores.
This is going to be.
Did they set them in an appropriate level? That's a reasonable question to ask. And if we only have 45% who passed, that's not so bad with that context. Without context, I might spread a narrative in the community that sheds us in a different light. But with that context, that tells me we're doing pretty darn well.
Well, and I'll just speak, because I mentioned this in the Humboldt and Prescott Unified Governing Board meeting, that's where the comparison data comes into play. You know, if you say 90% is passing, well, okay, that's great, but where do we compare to other districts and the state average? I mean, that arbitrary mark of what's passing, the comparison's what comes into most play on how we're doing.
And I'm so glad you mentioned that, Brian, because we'll roll right into that.
Thanks.
But I'm going to share math first. This is our PUSD, the math scores, and again at the bottom is the ACT score according to the state from the state handout there. So you'll see with the 63 starting in grade 3 down to the 21 in grade 8 math. And obviously it's an easy thing to point out how things are going lower. And this is actually true across the state that's on there. In order to understand that, as Brian just said, you really need to take a look at how do we compare to the state, and we chose to show the county as well for you guys today. And you'll notice in the darker green in there, those are dark green because those are all the areas that we are higher than the state and our scores are higher than the county. The yellow, we're higher than the county, but we're not higher than the state in these areas. Thinking of the bell curve, and the entire state in grade 8 is at 27% passage rate. This was one of the reasons I needed to talk to them, because I'm like, what does this mean? How is this? I was told that not only in our state, but nationwide, the 6th, 7th, 8th middle school math is very low. And part of the reason is the impact of COVID on it. But specific to Arizona, I was also given this information that we are actually doing, Kelsey and I are doing data meetings with our principals throughout this week. And something we're going to share with them that we've discussed is in 6th, 7th, and 8th, specifically 6th grade, what they found when they analyzed the data is that the students are not answering the questions completely. Some of them are multiple choice or explain your responses, and kids are only giving partial answers. So they're not getting into the proficient or highly proficient category, or they're not answering enough to get them there. And she said this is what they noticed when they analyzed the actual answers that students are giving on these tests. The state has put out some documents for us. They're called item specifications, and anybody in the public can go on the site and look at them. And they give some detail about this is what kind, in this standard, this is the kind of answer that we're looking for. So those are things that are on our plate that we're going to be sharing with the principals to be able to help the teachers to understand. And it's one of the areas that we are planning to look at in our district. To say, first of all, is it in our curriculum being put out that way, where kids have to answer that way? Are teachers teaching it and using it that way? Are students understanding what they need to do to answer questions? It's not answering to the test. We aren't telling them the answers, but we have to teach them how to navigate these tests for them to be fair.
Renee?
Yes.
In middle grades, we are started, by that level, we're starting to send some of our kids into more accelerated math classes. Do all the kids at each of those grade levels take the test?
So all of
the same
tests,
test?
Great question, because when it was the AZ Merit, our students maybe in 8th grade that were taking algebra or geometry, they took the algebra or geometry test. And now, it doesn't matter what class they are in, if they're in an algebra class or in a geometry in 8th grade, they are required to take the grade level math course. That is correct.
So in other words, when you explained at the top that as opposed to like comparing it to a weekly assessment where you're tested on Friday what you learned throughout the week, it's not just cumulative for the year, but in some cases it's multiple years. Is that correct?
It is, so a student might be in a algebra class, but the test they're taking could be an 8th grade class. It's only 1 year coverage on the test, but it's based on their chronological age grade, not the content of what they're learning.
It's something that they could have learned that content
Multiple years ago.
more than 1 year ago.
Correct.
Have we actually looked at the data? I know when I gave it was way back with the AZ merit. When we got the scores back, I could look at my classes and see that they had passed the 8th grade and they had passed the algebra. That was when they had to take both. Are we looking at the specific teachers and seeing that those 8th graders who are in algebra are they the problem? Or are we just kind of assuming it right at the moment?
Well,
Would you like to go with this?
sure, I'll answer. Renee and I just had this discussion. So in 2019, Renee started to really dig into those individual student scores, the kiddos that were accelerating. How are they doing? Because they're having to go back and take their grade level test. And we were starting to see a little bit of concerns that maybe we were moving them a little too fast. And then we kind of got bogged down with COVID. And so I asked Renee this year to really dig into those honors kiddos that are moving at a faster pace and look at how they're doing on the grade level standards that they haven't had for a year or two. And maybe that's where we need to make that adjustment.
And being a former math teacher too, I mean, so much of math is vocabulary. Just knowing what to do, perimeter area, those things that are specific to that course, algebra, pre-algebra. And so you hear perimeter 2 years ago, you know the mathematical, how to do add up all the sides. But if you don't remember what that vocabulary means, you're not going to get it right even though you have the skills. It's an issue.
I would like to see that when we finally get it. That would be interesting. Because I know we kind of assume it right at the moment, but I just would like to know concrete. That's it.
Right, and I appreciate that. We are able at our level to get it all the way down to the student. So I can pull it down to a single student and trace it back for the years that they've tested. And so that's what I will be doing based on Marty's request to kind of see where we're at. So I'm sure when we're able to, we'll share the data in a way that doesn't point out a specific child, right? But we can see some trends that might be happening. Thank you for
Elle, do you have a question?
Well, so I just wanted to point out, I was actually one of the students that took the accelerated classes and did have to take those tests, and I found it extremely difficult, like you said, Mr. Moore, to remember that vocabulary and to remember all those test strategies that I was supposed to learn 2 years prior, and let alone I was 2 years forward, so it could have been 3 years of knowledge that I couldn't remember. And I noticed my grade, like on my AZ merit, drop completely. So I definitely think it has an effect if that has anything to do with the conversation.
It does.
Thank you for your first-hand knowledge, because it is important to get all sides put in here.
Renee, just before we leave this slide, I rewatched our presentation from last year where we were looking at a very similar trend with 7th and 8th grade. I'm wondering if you have, because you started to kind of indicate that you're looking closely at 6th grade. Can you share a little bit more about maybe what we're seeing there? Because that last year was green.
Right. I would say a few years ago, we started to see at the high school that the math was a problem. And what we found then was most of the kids that were advanced had already taken algebra and moved on. So it was affecting our algebra. So we just kept tracing it and kept watching to see if there were any trends. And so it has remained in here, but I think, I'll show you something on the next slide. But I think based on my conversation with the state, is what has truly happened is the way the questions are being asked in some way, and it's my understanding with the curriculum, and somebody, all you math people, feel free to share with me, but we actually had a data meeting with the principal today, and our discussion was about K through 5. Math standards are kind of a progression, aren't they? And they keep building, and all of a sudden they hit 6th grade and they're very different.
Right.
And then 7th and then 8th grade, it seems to be a compilation of everything that wasn't covered. They throw on 8th grade. So what we are seeing, actually looking at the standards, is in grade 6, they're very different from 5th grade and lower. That was one thing. And then the other thing is the state said to me, you know, one of the things that if you think about, I'm going to go ahead with the next slide to show you in here. This is the data that is on the other slide. However, I also pulled some historical data from 2021, and I pulled from 2019, so pre-COVID. So we kind of have an idea. Like the state said, they improved from 21 to 22. We did as well. The ELA for the state went up 3 percentage points, we went up 4. The math went up 2, we went up 3% overall in there. But this was the discussion in here, again, was 6th grade of it kind of going downhill. And the lady at the state told me they are noticing that everywhere. And when they analyze the data, what they're finding is students are not completing the answers. You know, if they're multiple choice, they're not multiple answers.
So when are students accelerated in PUSD? Is it 5th and 6th grade?
That's where it starts.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. If that's where the acceleration happens and we start losing them because of what Elle mentioned before, you know, by the time they're in 8th grade, those numbers are going to be even lower if they've accelerated beyond grade level and they're not learning the grade level math at that time. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, and I think that's one factor to consider. But when we're seeing this trend across the state, there's also additional information that we need to look at. So I think there's multiple pieces that we need to investigate and determine where we are as a district.
There's just such a big difference between that 5th and 6th grade. And you see it somewhat on the state and county level as well, I think, on the previous slide. You'll see a similar kind of difference between those 5th and 6th grade scores. Because it's a big drop. And if that's where acceleration is happening after 5th grade, then that kind of makes sense to me. They're moving beyond that 6th grade curriculum.
Yeah, and we're going to definitely dig into those individual kiddo scores because we don't want to take that opportunity away if they are doing okay. So
sure.
I think that is a big change that happens as they move into those middle school years. We start to kind of track them into these honors programs, which is different than elementary. And we see a lot of progress in elementary, but I think there's also something going on with the standards because we see it across the state.
Absolutely.
It's complicated. I mean, we've been looking at this for 5 or 6 years. I mean, we've really been trying to get to the root of this.
Is PUSD that much different from the state in where our kids are moving forward, though? So, I mean, if that's the case, I can see that being an issue across the state, not just here.
Right.
We just reflect what's happening.
Yeah.
One of the things I love, though, is we got these scores just last week. I went in, was this yesterday? Friday. So Friday I went to ask Kelsey about something else, couldn't find her. She was in we call it the backstage room. She and Renee and Shelley Reed, who's our district intervention coordinator, were all in there. The copies were literally still warm. They'd just gotten our test scores. And instead of saying, well, how can we provide context for this? They're digging in and saying, how can we get better? Let's take a look at these strands. Let's take a look at these scores. Let's take a look at these grade levels. Let's take a look at these teachers and see how can we get better at this. Again, the ink is barely dry on these scores, and we're already looking at how can we get better for next year. So I love that we're providing context for this isn't nearly as bad as a few people are spewing in the newspaper or on the internet. That's important information. But even more important to me is that we're digging in and we're seeing, how do we get better? We're never satisfied. I appreciate that.
I would like to emphasize, too, that we are continually looking at what's causing the issue and what can be done about it. I would also like to point out that the district schools in this state are the only ones who have their scores published.
Did they give us any explanation for releasing
So
the
let me
scores?
clarify that as well. You can find charter schools within the major file. In fact, when I had all of Arizona, that included district and charter schools. It is in there.
It's buried.
However, you will find much of the information redacted.
Yeah.
There's a lot of asterisks in those schools as well. Sarah, did you have a question?
Did they provide any, because you mentioned at the top that it's important for us to know when the scores are going to be released so that we can prep some of this back-end analysis and move into just action. So did they give any explanation for why we suddenly got those released?
In the webinar that I attended, the bottom line there, it sounds like there's a lot of new people in accountability. And so they're working their way through some of the information. And that was basically the bottom line. There's a lot of new people and they're trying to communicate. I have to say, last year, this year, I have had great discussions with the people at the state in assessments and accountability. They've been very open for me to call and talk to at that point. But I think they might be going through some growing pains. For example, I just, right away, I think on Friday, I said, we have an asterisk in a group that we have close to 300 students in. So it's not the 10 or less students. And then I got the email back an hour ago that said, we are going to re-release the data. No time when, no timeline. They didn't give me a date, but, so my guess is they're going to run it again.
I just find it that in third grade, when we just are first testing these kids, we have, phenomenal scores, and then it goes down every year.
So, and a couple thoughts out there. In our district, we started a new math curriculum just a couple years ago. I think 2019 it was adopted maybe at the high school. I have it written down somewhere over there, but I think it's 2019 where the Vision Project, is that one? At the high school started. And anytime you start a new curriculum in a district, it takes time for teachers to understand it, to read it, and to teach it. So that happened in 2019, and then, of course, everything kind of fell apart in 2020. For our third grade, and Kelsey can speak more to this about, they had started Engage New York Math prior to that. Yes, would that be true?
6, maybe 7 years ago is how long we've had Engage New York at the
But I
K-4
thought they
level.
had Engage New York all the way through 6th grade.
Now they do.
Now they do.
Yes.
But it wasn't adopted till like 2019,
Until later,
right?
yes.
Pre-COVID and then the COVID crash.
Does that right, Andy? 19?
I think it was
18, 19?
That you adopted it, right? Yeah. So I do think, and we also have some rock stars in third grade teachers wise. It's amazing what they put out year after year in there. So, I think that's one thing. Another thing I wanted to point out on here, and as Clark said, we're digging in already. And one of the reasons we're digging in already is because we just see a score here. And then, of course, we have to go into fight mode. Like, why does it say that? What is going on? But when we look at grade 5, if you look, they're also going down here. And they're at 45 in this last year. And it probably wouldn't stand out as much to us because it's not in the 20s or it's not one of our lower ones. And we are focusing in math as a district this year. But I learned from the state that they analyzed the grade 5 answers and the whole test because grade 5 seems to be the most disrupted grade in ELA across the state. They analyzed all their data and they said they didn't see anything wrong, anything funny about the test that was given, but they did notice across the state, grade 5 ELA has significantly dropped. And then what we talked about was, well, let's see, grade 5, grade 4, grade 3 in 2020. These students would have been grade 3 when we went to a lot of home, online instruction. And knowing what I've learned, and Kelsey's helped me out to understand better, is that K-2 is learning to read, those foundational skills. You get to third grade, that's really the first year where you're reading to learn. And that was 2020 for this group of students. So, just a quick action step that we've done is we started looking at some of the data, and you can actually drill down in some of our programs to some of the foundational skills that our kids are missing, which I'll share with Teresa when we meet with her later on this week. But those are the kind of things that we as a district continue to look at. Yes, we definitely have this on our radar, but there's more depth than just the number that we often see published.
So hopefully they won't change all the lines and the tests, and maybe next year we can actually like compare and like see some hopeful improvement.
Absolutely, absolutely, that would be my hope as well.
Especially with a full year of in-person instruction that we're having.
And getting back on track, we have a new curriculum in ELA, which began in, is it grades 5 through?
This year, yes.
5 through 12, new ELA curriculum. And I think the really neat thing is they're more aligned properly and they're up to date. And then K through 4 was last year, they adopted a new ELA curriculum. So I think, we're moving in those steps to get everybody on board and support our teachers and ultimately our students to get them everywhere. So I always love to put this up because I just want to be reminded we are working as a district and we are looking at things top level as a district down. But it includes all of our schools in here with the motto being every child, every day. So while we're doing the whole big district, this is still where we're at.
Other questions for Renee?
Sure.
So just regarding the ACT test, because that's the one I've taken most recently. I took that last year in 11th grade and then actually retook it last Saturday.
Nice.
She's
fresh.
Because it was so fun the first time.
You don't even look that far.
So just in regards to that, you talk a lot about how it's a comprehensive test and it's like the curriculum will teach you it over, say like the 4 years I was tested on all of the math that I learned in high school. But, and I've heard this mentioned as well, a lot of the test is learning how it words things and how to actually take the test. And I think that could almost be like, that is sometimes the hardest part of the test is trying to figure out what they ask. So I'm wondering if there are like programs or something through the school that will actually take a specific amount of time rather than just the 4 years to like learn how to take the test rather than the information that's on the test, but testing strategies and stuff, because for all of the state tests that I've taken, it's been preparation on my own and like through test programs online and everything, but it's never been offered through the school. So I'm wondering if there are opportunities through the school program to learn how to take those
Like
tests.
an elective ACT prep.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, something.
I am so glad that Adam is here today. This because I think with the AASA, we actually do things in the classroom for navigation, to teach navigation so that if the kids don't get caught up. Adam, I'll let you
I'm really
go with
excited to
this.
see what we get now, because ACT Aspire is like
Right,
a
that's what
practice
I meant.
ACT. So we now have a baseline to see where those kids go by the time they take it as 11th graders. I think this also does give us some real opportunity, because if we can get something to be consistent. If you watched that first slide she showed, it was like, you're taking an algebra, a geometry, and an algebra 2 end of course test. That switched to 10th grade, which is where we started having the, kind of like what Elle experienced when she was talking about some of those tests where she had to go backwards. Now we're moving to ACT. I'm excited to see consistency from those groups, and I think we could then in turn start to have it, because it does impact our entire school. So why wouldn't we then drop that into our classrooms? And I heard elective, but honestly I think it could happen within what we're doing, because it's just part of standards-based instruction around our state assessment. So I'm really excited to see what that looks like when we have a second year of ACT Aspire and ACT. I can't wait to see our last year's 9th graders when they're 11th graders, because that will be a real measurement for us, in my opinion, too, because we now have something to say, here's where they were, here's where we hope they're going to end up.
And Miranda, what a great point you bring up there. My kids, same thing. We made them take the ACT 3-4 times. So that national average of 19 that they're using as the cut score between passing and failing, that's based on kids taking the test over and over and over in some cases. So the fact that we've got 45% of our kids in a one-off test already making that cut score, reflects really darn well on us. So anybody who goes out and says, oh, 55% of kids are failing the ACT and BHS, I just want to put my arm around them and say, listen, you don't know what you're talking about.
And I just want to speak to your point a little bit too, is test-taking strategies and skills is incredibly important. And you're coming out of an elementary school, that's something that we talked about even at the kindergarten level. So we were starting to teach kindergartners how to take those assessments. The one that's been the most consistent for us has been Galileo. And so teachers would do things like present those Galileo questions on their ITV and talk through how do you attack this question? How do you navigate those test stools within the test? So it is starting. The hard part about these stage assessments goes to what Adam just talked about, and it's the lack of consistency. So we've changed tests, which changes the format and the navigation, and how do you navigate through that test on its own. So it's really hard for us to stay ahead of that sometimes, and it takes some time to learn that. The other factor to that is our teachers are not allowed to look through those tests. We can't see the actual questions and the tests that are provided. So how do we best prepare our students for things that we don't necessarily know all the time? We're taking the practice tests for any of those assessments that come up. For the AASA, we were taking those practice tests. We're going through the samples as we can, but there's still an element of there's things that we don't know, that we can't necessarily prepare for when we're not allowed to see how they're tested. And teachers will continue to, talk about that, and we will continue to try and find those documents like Renee talked about with the middle school math of they're not answering the complete question. They may fully understand that concept, but if they don't understand how to answer in the way that they're looking for, it's not going to count for them. So it's not an easy process, but it is definitely something that we are going to continue to address and continue to try and help you guys with as much as we can.
And I get nervous. I hear that test-taking skills are important, and they're important for taking tests. Right. When I think about that presentation at the top of this meeting about the whole child and the portrait of the graduate, I know that nobody had me take a standardized test for any of the jobs that I took. So I worry because I hear that test-taking skills are going to be best when they're integrated into our everyday culture of test taking. But it's hard when we have to pull that out because we don't know and have it be a special thing, because then we're taking time away from that direct instruction that, Granite Mountain has increased in these subject areas. So I just felt compelled to share that.
Well, and Sarah, I learned something very interesting this year. So I have a senior in high school who's applying for colleges, and it took her less than a half an hour to apply for colleges, and they did not ask for standardized test scores. And Adam, I don't know if you have more information on this, but from everything I've heard is they said it's not a true predictor of how well students perform and of their academic success. So a part of me is celebrating that. I'm sorry.
So are students. Just high five.
Some schools still do look at it.
Some schools still require that, but a lot are moving away from that because it's not a great predictor of success. And Adam, I don't know if you have any other information on that, but
it's very similar to some of the other things that they've adjusted. I think there's been some rethinking of traditional formatting of what it looks like to get kids into college, and I think that they are now adjusting things such as, are we interested in that standardized test as much as it used to be, like you gotta hit this number to get in.
Right.
And so it'll be interesting to see where that goes over the next couple of years, but it's like a lot of things in education, it seems like there's been that moment where we went, okay, let's see what's best for kids moving forward to make sure they're successful.
And best for our community.
Unfortunately, I think you're exactly right. There are some schools that still require standardized tests. You can't get in without them, but many schools are finding that high school grade point average is a much better indicator of success in college than standardized tests are. So there is a movement now in higher education to move away from standardized testing as the end-all be-all. It doesn't mean you may not have to submit it. You might not have to, but there are many schools that are making it optional, and they don't evaluate your standardized testing any longer like they used to. So, and that's just within the last, I've been out of work for 3 years, so it's just within the last 3 years that that's really starting to become something.
Are we still offering the SAT on campus?
Yeah, that's more of like a weekend scenario, so our kids can sign up for the SAT, and, you know, luckily we just have staff who are willing to do that and sign up through the SAT company to do this.
If I remember right, this a long time ago when I did it, the SAT, you could like specify colleges that you wanted it sent to. Do they do that for the ACT?
Yes.
Even the one that you know, that the whole state takes, our kids go through and they fill out the same thing, and they can specify that they would like these scores submitted. Now, some kids take it multiple times, but again, that's part of the process.
Yeah, there's 5 or 6 opportunities a year to take both the SAT and the ACT optionally on the weekend, in addition to the now required ACT.
I would also like to second your comments, Sarah. I had the same reaction. Anything else? Renee, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I appreciate all the work you put in over the weekend to be ready for us. Thank you.
We're ready for principals next.
All right. Moving on, we're now at the summary of current events. And at this point, I will mention that some of you may have noticed a different face beside me this month. Our superintendent, Joe Howard, was out of town last week, and he's not been able to get back yet. So he is coming back, but fortunately, Clark Tenney, an assistant superintendent, graciously stepped in to fill in tonight, so.
Isn't that your job?
To step in? I
Yeah, but
suppose
he was gracious.
Marty and I arm wrestled for it.
we had to arm
I
wrestle
lost,
for it.
so here I am. Yeah, so Mr. Howard's out of town. He's actually, I don't think he would mind if I say he's out on a fishing boat, fishing for halibut off the coast of Alaska in the open ocean. It's something that he did before he became a teacher and a school administrator. And he was asked by some of his old crew, hey, join us for a week. He said, okay, but I got to be back on this day. They said, no problem, dude. And it turns out they've had some engine issues and some weather issues, and he was sleeping overnight in a Connex box and some things like that. So as of Sunday evening, he wasn't lost at sea. As far as we know, he texted us, or someone with his phone who was impersonating him, it texted us and told us he loved us and whatnot, but yeah, he's not here tonight. All right. He's on his way?
Today, he is on his way home.
Love it. I feel better already. If I lose one more arm wrestling match to Marty, I'm going to turn in my man card. So, all right.
Do you have any comments for the current events?
I do have just a couple really quick, and I'll go quickly because we've had some very thorough presentations. Really appreciate that. And we've got some good community partners here to share some things with us later. We don't want to hold them up. First of all, I'd like to point out something that I thought you were going to mention. People had noticed. We had a reception for these folks in addition to Dr. Donovan before our meeting started tonight. I was at City Council meeting, so I wasn't here, and I apologize. But it's really great to have Miranda Adams and Elle Long.
I was going to have them introduce
Oh,
themselves.
okay. Would you do that? Would you
See
like to do
this?
that now?
See this?
Yes?
That's where.
All right.
We can do it now. since-
Either way, you just let me know how you'd like
Ladies,
this to go.
Would you just introduce yourselves to the group, please?
So my name is Miranda Adams. I am a senior at Prescott High School, and I've never been on student council or anything, so I'm really excited to be in more of a representative position. I'm just really grateful to be here, and it's been great so far, so. Hi, my name's Elle Long. I'm also a senior at Prescott High School. Sorry for the nose thing, I got the sniffles. I do a lot of sports at school, and I realized that leadership is what I want to be a part of, and leadership is who I want to become when I'm older, and I realized that's who else than, these guys, right? So I said I'm gonna see and learn what I can, and that's what I'm doing.
Neat. Please.
We welcome you, ladies. We're so pleased that you've joined us. We have been doing this program for a number of years where we've had student representatives to the board, and they add a real element to our discussions, and we're really happy to have you.
Great, absolutely. And as you can imagine, we always get one or two of our sharpest kids at the high school to help us out, but you can tell as well that these are two of our nicest kids at the high school. We're really glad you're here. And you've heard already the insights that they've added to our discussions. I love that. Thank you so much, ladies, for being here. It's good to have you here. All right, a couple of other things then, just really quickly. I want to provide some context very briefly for the great presentation, moving presentation that Carolyn gave. She mentioned like 40 difficult things that she's dealt with. Carolyn's been with us for 17 years. I did some quick math. We've averaged about 1,350 kids at the high school, 180 days a year in those 17 years. That comes out to 4,131,000 kids that she could have dealt with daily. So the fact that she's had 40 really difficult things to deal with over those 17 years, maybe not all that surprising. But it is moving to hear the great things that she's done, and Adam and Andy and other administrators here can attest, Karen and Kelsey can attest. There are some really difficult things that go on at school every once in a while with the whole community of kiddos that we've got, and it's so great to have registered nurses in every one of our schools who help us out. By the way, if you counted to 4,131,000 and you said one of those numbers every second, it would take you 48 days to get to that number. 1, 2, 3, 4. 48 days. That's a lot of kid days that they've been dealing with over the years. She's fantastic. We love our nurses. Everybody who's involved in education, I want to give them a hug. When I see a school nurse, I want to give them a hug and start to cry, and you can probably see why. Next thing I want to mention just really quickly, our fall sports are underway at the high school. Mr. Neely, maybe visiting with us a little bit later, could give us some more details, but I know that one of our higher profile teams, the football team, is off to an amazingly good start. They've taken on one team that was maybe on hard times and just chewed them up and spit them out, and another team that's traditionally very strong and went to that school and did very well against them too. And I know from reading the good news that assistant principal, Mrs. Allman, sends out each week that same is true for a lot of our different clubs and activities and sports at the high school. Another thing I wanted to mention is recently, oh perfect, it's up here, 9/11 was the commemoration of 9/11 was 2 days ago, and some of our schools on Friday, some of our schools on Monday did recognition ceremonies there. You probably know it's part of state statute that we teach about 9/11 at every one of our K through 12 schools. We did that before it was in state statute because it's an important part of U.S. history. It's a sad part, a moving part, and something that our kids need to know about. We focus less on some of the sad, difficult parts and more on a celebration, particularly younger grade levels, of our first responders in town. So for many years, Abaya Judd has done something. They've what they call their Heroes Luncheon. We invite firefighters, EMTs, police officers, etc., sheriff's deputies to Abaya Judd, and they eat lunch with their kids. A lot of them are our dads and moms at the school, and we have a day that we put out banners and welcome them and write letters, and they give out stickers and high fives and pictures, and it's fantastic. It's a great way to connect our kids with our first responders. This year at Taylor Hicks, they did something similar as well. They had the entire student body come out. You can see the fire engine showed up. My wife teaches at Discovery Gardens, the preschool at Taylor Hicks, and her kids were just so excited they couldn't stand it. The firefighters were
When
there.
the crane went out, it
oh
was
my
just
gosh.
like magic.
Something, absolutely. There you go. That's what I'm talking about. At the high school, I was able to participate. It was Friday, wasn't it? Friday morning.
Yeah.
Our junior ROTC group, which is, as you probably know, considered to be one of the best in the United States, they showed one of the many reasons why, doing a moving ceremony there on Friday, commemorating 9/11 and talking a little bit deeper at a more age-appropriate level about what that means to our country and what we owe to our country and our first responders as a result of that. So those were neat things. Also, we had several of our students that were involved in a community day of service on 9/10 or 9/11. 9/11 was Sunday, so a lot of folks went out and did their service activities on Saturday. So we had a number of students and their parents and whatnot involved in those activities over the course of the weekend as well. And then the last thing I wanted to bring up is a sadder piece. Dr. Taylor Hicks Jr., who's the son of Dr. Taylor Hicks Sr., who Taylor Hicks Elementary School was named for, and who was the president of our school board here for many years. I think his photo's up on the wall there, passed away just a few days ago. And our condolences go out to that good family who have been supporters of our school district for years. All of their kids have gone through our PUSD schools. They've been leaders in our schools on the professional level, in some cases board members, and leaders within the schools in student council and other things. And been great supporters of PUSD over the years, and we love them and appreciate them, and our condolences go out to the Hicks family. Those are my current events.
Okay. Board members, any current events? I did attend the Arizona School Boards Association Law Conference last week. Picked up some very helpful information that I will gradually pass along as time goes on. All right. Ladies, do you have any reports you'd like to make?
Yes.
Fantastic.
Yes. Okay, so I was given the opportunity to be a part of, what is it called? Student Council Make-A-Wish opportunity, where we were all raising money for the Make-A-Wish Foundation as a school together. But specifically at the football game, we decided to do something called SOCA Senior, which is basically where 4 seniors compete to raise the most money, and whoever gets the least amount of money gets dunked in front of the entire school at halftime on the Friday night football game. So I, as one of the seniors, elected to not get dunked. We all in all raised from the whole Make-A-Wish Foundation between $2,500 and $3,000. So that was pretty big for us. I was pretty excited. I won the Make-A-Wish SOCA Senior and was able to raise over $1,000.
Nice job.
Cool. I walked around a lot of neighborhoods for a lot of hours. I did get sunburned. Surprise, surprise. But no,
She's so funny.
that was great. We ended up winning the football game. Absolutely, we crushed them. Yeah, we crushed them pretty good. So that's really all I've got to share for Stuco and Make-A-Wish.
Okay, thank you, El.
Silver Ford Explorer outside, if anybody that owns it.
That's the first.
Of course, it's mine.
You can't get
okay.
fired, don't worry about it.
Miranda.
So I spoke to the student council president or teacher that runs student council, and they were talking about how they are planning a student and teacher appreciation week, but they're not sure on the dates yet. And then this Thursday, Friday, we have days for parent-teacher conferences. And the biggest thing that I think maybe just me is looking forward to is this homecoming week is coming up soon, and there's going to be a home football game on the 7th of October. The dance is on a Wednesday, the 5th of October, and then we have a parade downtown on the 3rd. So those will be upcoming, and then I think the current events have been covered. Also the theater production. There's a practice for a festival in Phoenix on November 18th and 19th, and then the theater announced the Christmas Carol. So.
Very great, ladies. Thank you. All right. We will move along to our consent agenda. Are there any questions or comments about any of the items on the consent agenda? I would once again point out that we had 41 individuals or businesses that contributed to the district in the value of $17,200 this month. Yeah, that was, I mean, really, this was pretty spectacular.
And I think noting too, it's important to note that many of those donations were in memory of Rod Cordis, who was an administrator for a long time in our district. Just wanted to say that.
All right. If there are no other comments on the consent agenda, could I get a motion to approve?
I'll move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. All right. We will move along to our study and voting session. Do we have any comments?
No, we have guests.
We do.
SPS here that they're going to help share with us about our.
Well, yeah, but we didn't have any public comments. That's what I meant. Yeah, okay. The first item on our agenda in this section is to consider approving a memorandum of understanding between Prescott Unified School District and Yavapai College for the early college program. And I am delighted to welcome our representatives from Yavapai College. Clark, you want to introduce our guests?
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of some of the nicest people I know, Clint Ewell and Dean Holbrook are here from Yavapai College, and they're going to talk with us. Oh, and is Dr. Ryan here as well? Oh, there you, of course, yes. Dr. Ryan's here as well. Diane Ryan is here. Thank you for all three for being here and for sitting through all these other great parts of our meeting. Hopefully we've got you all educated in what we do. So we're going to be talking a little bit about, and Adam, I think you've got some information you could potentially share with us as well. As you know, we've started an early college program at Yavapai College this year, and we're looking at expanding that beyond just seniors this year to seniors and juniors next year. So shall I turn it over to you good folks, and you can tell us how things have been going so far and give us some information and answer any questions that our board members may have. Dean, if you can start things out.
So my name is Dean Holbrook, and I'm the Director of Early College Partnerships at the college. And this is something we've been talking about for a while with Prescott Unified. We've had a dual enrollment agreement with them for almost 20 years. And so as we kind of looked at, one of the things that has come up a lot in dual enrollment is the struggle to find teachers that meet our credentialing requirements that can teach dual enrollment classes at the high school. And so as that struggle kind of developed, we talked about, are there some other ways that we could provide options for students to take college classes that they're ready for when they're in high school? And so the idea of an early college at the college itself came about. We looked at some other models that are out there. The one that we looked at a lot was one that's happening down in Tucson at the Vail School District, and their partnership with Pima Community College. And so we kind of modeled our pilot program this fall around that program. We've got, I think it's what, 17 students this fall. They come to our campus every morning, and they start with a high school class, and then they go to their college classes, and they're in college classes Monday through Thursday from 9:30 through 2 o'clock. They're taking a variety of classes based on what they're interested in and where they're going, and what kind of classes they're going to need as they progress on from Yavapai College after this year. And so it's kind of neat to kind of see how every single student is a little different, although there's a number of them that are in a particular class, a number of them in another particular class, but then there may be one student that has a particular interest, and they're the only one that's in that class. But they get together, they have lunch together. We set up a classroom specifically for them, so it's kind of their space. We set up an office for Molly Orr, who is from Prescott High School, and she is in there all the time, and it's just kind of a nice landing space for those students. But you can see them walk. I watch them walk around campus every day, and they're just having a ball. They're really enjoying themselves, and we're looking forward to expanding that next year. This year it was just a group of seniors that Adam kind of personally kind of put together. This is a good group to start this pilot, and we want to expand that to juniors and seniors next year, and see what that's going to look like moving forward. We're also going to use this as a model with some other school districts in the county that are really excited about what's happening with Prescott High School and saying, how can we do something like that as well? So we're really excited about this pilot program, and that MOU that you have is sort of just an idea as to how the partnership works.
Absolutely, I appreciate that. I'll just piggyback a couple of things on what Dean had to share. As you know, we've been looking at additional ways that we could partner with Yavapai College. What a great resource right here in the area, and yet because of our scheduling issues and whatnot, we've just had a super hard time getting kids over there and whatnot. And you mentioned we have difficulties with teacher credentialing, so that having Yavapai College classes on the PHS campus has been difficult. So we found this model that they're using in Vail successfully and said, hey, what if we could get 8 or 9 kids to do it this year? In 17, we're super excited about this pilot. So yeah, this MOU that we're asking you to approve this evening is just expanding that and codifying what we've got and including juniors for this next year.
And then just wanted to point out, we've got 2 of our VPs in the room that were very instrumental in making sure that, that all of this stuff came together, that we had the resources on our end to make it happen so that we can get it up and running this year.
So I personally would just like to say a giant thank you to you guys for making this happen. For our PHS kids, I know there was a ton of work that went into this. So I want to give, a huge thank you to Adam and Molly Orr as well for thinking outside the box. I have a different perspective because my kiddo is one of those who's in that. Okay. And I was very nervous at first. Part of that was just me because I wasn't ready to let her go off yet. I thought I had another year before we had to deal with the college word. Right. But what I've seen from her in such a short time is so impressive. She's happy, she's supportive, she's learning a ton, and I feel really good about not just throwing her on that campus and letting her go, but she's got this team around her. So thank you guys for making such an amazing opportunity for our kids.
Yeah, we were so glad that it all worked out. We were able to get it started this fall.
That's great.
As I mentioned at our last meeting, I have been to visit the classroom and got to watch the energy that was exhibited by those kids and how thrilled they are to be there. And it is definitely a great program, and I'm so glad that we were able to get that going.
Yeah.
Can you just explain to me the mechanism of tuition and fees? Are the parents, the families paying those tuition fees? Is the district paying that?
Do you want to speak to that, Clark, or do you want me to? Or?
Yeah, I believe that I can from the discussions that we had, and I think it's going this way. Okay. Yes. So as we send students to Yavapai College, we receive ADM from the state, and we're using that to pay the tuition essentially to Yavapai College. So, elaborate on that for us, Dean.
Yeah. So the way we've got it set up in our system, we flag all those students, and then we charge the tuition to Prescott Unified. They're using the money that they're getting for ADM from the state to then pay that tuition bill to us. The state allows school districts to do that, to allow students to, that are ready for that, to progress and take college classes. As long as the school district pays, then they get that ADM reimbursement from the state.
All right, so these are still our ADM students?
Yep, yeah, essentially the state says if you want to have them take classes at your high school, we'll pay you to make sure that can happen. And if you have another alternative option for them that involves a community college, we'll pay you for that option as well. So.
Yes, there's still Prescott High School students that still graduate in May. They're still encouraged to be a part of, some of those activities that are a part of Prescott High School, whether it's the athletic games or it's the dances or, any of those other being part of clubs or that kind of stuff. They're kind of living in both worlds. They get to still have some of those fun things with high school, but they also get to experience the fun stuff with college as well.
So they have access to the full student clubs and organizations at Yavapai College as well?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And they also have access to all of our support mechanisms. So, our learning center, those students are able to go in and get tutoring if they're struggling with a particular class. They use our library, all of those support services that we have.
All right,
they drooled over your library.
It's a great library and has a lot of resources available for them.
I'd love to hear just a little bit more about, what was one of the greatest takeaways from this pilot program, including any challenges that we can look for, that we can watch over the next few years as we continue this partnership?
Yeah, I think we're a little bit too early to have a takeaway yet, other than some of the excitement that the parents and the students are seeing, and that the staff members are seeing in dealing with the students. But some of the things that we're looking forward to is how do we grow this and have the right classes available in the right time slots for those students to be able to take, and provide something for both juniors and seniors. Those that just want to come as seniors, what is that going to look like? And those that want to start as juniors and do both junior and senior year. This year was just seniors. And so that's one set of, hey, it kind of looks like this, but if you add it for both juniors and seniors, what's that going to look like? So those are kind of the things that we'll be talking about this fall, and using some of the things we learned this first time around about this worked well, we need to tweak that, and make this other little piece work a little better.
Since you're gonna be doing juniors and seniors, are these classes that they're taking, the college classes, are they applying to their high school credit? Like, or do they have to get all their credits in before junior year?
Yeah, great question. So the short answer to your question is yes to the first one, not the second one. It does apply to their high school credit. The state requirements for high school graduation remain the same. So they're going to need to have 4 English classes, 4 math classes, et cetera, all of those types of things. But yeah, they're getting them through Yavapai College, and to the extent that they have classes that don't fall into those categories, electives, those count toward their electives, et cetera. So yeah, they will need to get all of their high school credits in order to graduate from Prescott High School, in addition to getting an early start on Yavapai College. And again, I'm super excited about this on a personal level. We've been looking for, it's one of the, you probably know, one of the premier community colleges in the United States of America, and it's 3.5 miles from our campus, and we've just been able to nibble around the edges of the potential, and I really see this as a great pipeline for our kids to start and get a jump on college. I'm sure some of them will say, I love Yavapai College. I'm going to finish off my associate's degree here next year after I graduate high school, or we may even get into a situation where juniors and seniors can get all the way through that. By the time they graduate from us, the sky's the limit as far as what this looks like, and there's a good model for this, again, down south that we're looking at, we're consulting with, and I'm takeaways are early. You're right. We're 6 weeks into this. But, man, the fact that it's going as well as it is, 6 weeks into it, we gave ourselves about 6 weeks to pull this together before the school year ended last year. And the fact that we've got nearly 20 kids involved and things are going so smoothly is really exciting to me.
Yeah, and just to answer your question quickly, Kara, as students are looking to set up their schedule with the college, we were talking and making sure that they were also meeting all of their high school graduation requirements. And that'll be part of the, that's what Molly is, and our early college advisors are doing when they meet with the students, is they're looking and making sure that the college classes are meeting those high school requirements, but they're also preparing them for whatever those next steps are that the students are looking at.
Double credit, right? They get high school
Yes.
credit and they get the college
Yeah,
credit.
it's landing in both buckets. It's landing in the college bucket and the high school bucket.
Everybody wins.
Yeah, right now there's a lot of conversation just about allowing kids to be kids and kind of protecting them in a lot of ways from the adult world. So I'm curious if you could speak to, have we had any, Kelsey shared her experience as a mom putting her kid on that bus to a college. Have we had any other feedback from maybe the parents that have been involved in this, either positive or concerns, or what does that look like having a potentially 16-year-old on a campus where there are folks that are over 18?
I haven't heard anything. Adam, have you heard anything?
Not especially. What I would tell you is that I think the balance has been that space that they've discussed. They have a person they check in with every morning. They take a high school class before they move on. They come check out with that person before the end of their day. That person, Molly is amazing, and she has the ability to check in with them and make sure that they're progressing and finding out what their challenges are. And so I think that, one of the things that happens to a college student is that they almost have to reach out for help in those scenarios. We've got it built in with this program.
Right.
They've got an academic advisor, teacher, all right there that they can work with. So that's the part that I think has at least eased initially some of those concerns, because unlike, freshman year of college where a kid leaves and goes and has to deal with all that comes with that, they have somebody built in who they've built a relationship with that they can check in with, and who can help them through all the things that they might need right now. So they don't have to be 100% in the adult world. They really are getting the best.
They're not just thrown in. There's a lot of that.
There's a lot of good role models there.
Not only them, but they still go home at night. So they have their parents as support.
Well, and what I'm hearing, yes, they do, for sure. What I'm hearing from my own child is they've really become a team. And, you know, you referred to, they do have multiple of these students in the same classes, which I think helps with that too. So they're not navigating campus by themselves. They're not sitting in these classes by themselves with, you know, older students. They do have some of their peers in there with them, I think, which has made a huge difference as far as the experience and them feeling comfortable.
Is there a plan, or have you started looking at what the future holds for this group, this cohort of seniors? Do many of them plan to stay at Yavapai College and pursue their higher education through there, or do they, after this year, plan to transfer out? That'd be really interesting information for me personally, at least.
Yeah, we probably haven't gotten that far yet. There's probably been some initial conversations. We'd love to have them finish with us. Are some of them going to want to go off and pursue something else?
Right.
With a great scholarship from another university? Maybe. So, you know, one of the things about all of our early college stuff is we always try and give students all of the information they need to make the best choice for them. Whether that's coming to us and finishing up an AA and then transferring on, or whether it's taking the classes they've either done at the high school in dual enrollment, or as a part of early college, or concurrent enrollment, or whatever, and using those when they head off to some other institution.
So those advising resources are available to them intentionally in this program?
Yeah, we have an early college advisor that is specifically set up with that particular group of kids.
Okay.
And she's, you know, that's going to be some of the conversations throughout this year. Okay. What are your plans for next year?
Yeah.
You know, do you want to move on here and finish this degree or that degree? Do you want to move on somewhere else? Are you taking the right courses if you do want to move on, whether it's after an AA or after this year?
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you for being here.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Could I get a motion on this item?
I'll move that we approve a memorandum of understanding between Prescott Unified School District and Yavapai College for the early college program as presented.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve a memorandum of understanding between Prescott Unified School District and Yavapai College for the early college program as presented. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. Next item is about our transportation rental fee schedule. Really exciting.
It is.
Right.
I think it probably will have more discussion than the Yavapai College voting on it. Stuff's more expensive. We need to charge more. No, we rent our buildings and we rent our transportation, buses, and, you know, in the summer it's a lot of transportation to camps, and stuff's more expensive, you know, gas. And so it's put forward to you as a recommendation to increase how much we charge those that we rent to. It is something we do for a profit. It's something that we monitor when it comes to the costs of gas and utilities when we rent our buildings. It goes into our civics fund that we use to do our marketing and different things within the district. So our recommendation is to increase what you saw in the packet, and I can answer any question. And Mrs. Barker, our transportation director, is here to answer any as well.
How'd you get those gas prices?
How'd we get the gas prices?
Where can I get that?
Yeah, I would like some of that as well.
Any other questions or comments on this item? Could I get a motion, please?
I move that we approve Prescott Unified School District's proposed transportation rental fee schedule as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve Prescott Unified School District's proposed transportation rental fee schedule as presented. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. Next item is looking at Volt as a sole source procurement for next year.
PUSD is lucky to have an incredible purchasing director, Kathy Moody, and her job is to have relations with our vendors and have the best prices and things like that. But one of her more important jobs is to make sure we're following procurement law. And we can't spend more than $10,000 with a vendor without having quotes. If it's over 100,000, we have to go to bid. So part of her job is to look at any things we're going to buy and find out how we can do it legally. In this case, we have a company, and this voting item is specifically to make it a sole source for procurement law. It's not the purchase itself. But there is a company that we're looking to do business with named Volt, which will be over the $10,000 threshold. And so her recommendation, because of the proprietary nature of their software, is to have it be a sole source. And that takes governing board vote to have that be legal.
Where are it says security cameras, where are we using these?
It is a company that was approached at the high school. And so what it is, it's a proprietary software that uses regular camera feed. And the software analyzes things on that feed that we are able to program, can identify what looks like a weapon, a knife, or a gun, set parameters if people are standing too close to each other for too long, basically giving an alert to the designated person on campus. It is something that they are going to allow us to pilot during this first semester all the way through December 31st. And then during the second semester, we would be paying for the software, which is what's going to cost more than $10,000, and analyze whether it's something that we want continued at the high school or expanded to other campuses.
So it's more software than the actual hardware cameras?
Correct. It integrates. That's exactly right, and that's really what's proprietary about it. It uses the images that pretty much any security camera does, analyzes that image, and identifies any questionable threats that would in real time alert to that designated person to then look at and respond, nope, this is not something that we're worried about, or set into motion our emergency action plan.
We've had a number of parents this year who've expressed just some concerns, especially following the Uvalde shootings. And I see this as being something that we can do proactively to improve the safety and security in our schools. And I also understood, if I understood correctly, that we are the pilot for this program.
They're mainly within commercial businesses, and we would be the first educational institution that they're doing this in Arizona. And once again, it's not the purchase that you're voting on, it's actually just the sole source designation for the company that allows us to engage with business with a company.
All right. Other questions?
There's 4 or 5 things that we do to make our schools safer. We're always, that's right at the top of our list, even above academic success is making sure that kids are safe. And it is, while it's true that statistically it's the safest place kids go all day long other than their home, it's safer than the grocery store, safer than the park, safer than the movie theater, etc. We're constantly looking at this. So our social emotional learning is a big part of that as well, making sure we've got the right culture at school, that everybody has some place to go and everybody feels understood and accepted. That's a big part of school safety, but we're also looking to harden our campuses and do other things that we can to make things better and safer for our kids and our families. And this is just one part of that, piloting this to see if it's something that works well for us.
Okay. Why do we think there's no competition for something like this? Is it because it's like a fairly new technology, or is it just like our region?
Adam, you talked a little bit more. You can talk more accurately about that.
What's that?
I said, please, you can talk a little bit more accurately about that.
Yeah, so, this is something that I really hope is as good as it sounds. Simply put, it's pre-existing artificial intelligence watching cameras that says this rule was broken. It goes to a human being who validates that it's a real problem, and so within 30 seconds we could have a response. So that's my easiest description of what this thing is and what's going on. Nobody else is doing the version of this but this company. So kind of
Yeah, it's
potentially on the cutting edge here.
It's using the existing feed and analyzing the video, and then the alert system is what we're being said is the proprietary, and they have patents and all of those things that.
So this company is really looking to branch out into the education
Right.
sector where they have not been before.
And where's the precedent? Where are they already working?
They're in, they have large companies that they're working with in industry, is what they've been in business industry, but they care about schools and they want to create school safety, and so they're gonna potentially do that, and we get to be the first ones to see if it fits our needs.
And it'd be a stepping, once we get it integrated, like I said, free all the way to December 31st. At that time, there can be conversation. This isn't exactly what we thought it would be, and thanks, but no thanks. But this allows us to go forward in the second semester. And then right around, obviously, in January and February is our budgetary time. And if it's something that we really were impressed with, we can talk about budgeting expanded outside the high school.
Other questions or comments?
Just legally, do we need this sole source for the trial?
No.
Okay.
Motion to add Volt as a sole source procurement for the 2022-23 school years as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we add Volt as a sole source procurement for the 2022-2023 school years as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Next item is School Facilities Oversight Board conditions and terms and all sorts of good stuff.
The more that we are able to bring these to you, the more we're leveraging all the money we have at our disposal. This is the School Facilities Oversight Board terms and conditions, which needs to be voted on every time we are awarded money. And so for this particular item, it is for Granite Mountain. I applied for 7 individual $10,000, well, it's $9,950 individual grants for sole purposes of fixing our roofs when they leak. Obviously, replacing a whole roof with a lot of our buildings need costs a lot of money and a lot more hoops to jump through. But this would be, we have a leak, and the School Facility Oversight Board would pay for it. And so they're slowly approving my applications, and they have done so with 2, this being Granite Mountain. And upon your votes, we will then have access to $10,000, not district funds, local funds, but state funds to fix roofs at Granite.
Questions?
Nice job, Brian.
The more I can bring, the better I'm doing my job.
Could I get a motion, please?
I'll move that we approve the School Facilities Oversight Board terms and conditions for acceptance of monies from the Building Renewal Grant Fund, award contract number SFB/ERR-03066 for equipment repair replacement to repair roof leaks at Granite Mountain School, as presented.
It's been moved and seconded that we consider approving these terms and conditions from the School Facilities Oversight Board. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes.
In between the posting of this, we did have 2 other of those applications approved, so next month you'll have 2 more. And my task is, I'm going to make the agenda voting item longer, because I like hearing Andy have to say the whole paragraph
The whole thing.
as a motion.
Can I just change the number?
So the next item is exactly the same, but it is for this campus. And Andy, I enjoy hearing you say the paragraph as a motion on this one as well, if you shall see
Andy.
it to be your duty to make the motion.
Okay. I'll move that we consider approving the School Facilities Oversight Board terms and conditions for acceptance of monies from the Building Renewal Grant Fund, award contract number SFB-ERRs-03067 for equipment repair replacement to repair roof leaks at Discovery Gardens, as presented.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the terms and conditions for acceptance that put forward by the Schools Facilities Board. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. All right. Moving on to our discussion items. First is our very favorite school board summary budget report.
As presented.
Thank you, Brian.
You're welcome.
All right. Next item is an enrollment update.
Okay, this is good stuff. When talking about enrollment, in my world, there's two things. There's head count, which is the classroom's world. It's how many kids are in, the math class. And then there's the ADM world, which is our funding. And so I just want to kind of make sure we're all on the same page between those two. Once again, head count are bodies, but not all bodies are really equal, considering kindergarten students are a body in a classroom, but they're only funded half. Preschool, we have 160 or so preschool kids, but only those with IEPs or special needs are funded at half. And also, just in case you didn't know, we have about 90 or 80 students that are called District of Residence, not PUSD. That's Williamson Valley, which is a transportation district. Kirkland doesn't have a high school. Skull Valley, Hillside. And we charge tuition. They receive the ADM, so it doesn't show on any of our ADM reports, but they're bodies in our classroom. And we charge tuition for those students. And they show up on our budget on page 7 under other district tuition. So when it just comes down to it, it's complex. But hopefully I'll shed some light, debunk some information that we're down 500 students or so over the last couple of years, because actually it's the contrary. Right now, if we look in Power School, that we have 4,015 heads or bodies in our buildings. Compared to last year, and we used to only do, I have attendance for the last 5 years on a document, but we didn't include those district of other, the other district ones that we charge tuition. Just this year we started, because it's just, when people look at the high school and say we have empty classrooms, we don't, we're busting at the seams. So I do have that from day 12 of last year. So just kind of let you know, right now we have 4,015 kids, bodies in our classrooms. On day 12 of last year, there were,
3,877.
3,827.
Oh, is that what you have?
It's 27, yeah.
Okay.
And so we are 188 bodies up from last year. When it comes to ADM, this is actually really exciting. We're 100 ADM up from last year. And that's an ADM, like I said, prior years, we do a report every Friday. So literally from September 9th this year compared to September 10th last year, we're up 100 ADM. And since we're in current year funding, that means we budgeted a little bit higher when it came to ADM compared to last year, about 30 or 35 kids. So we will get to adjust our budget upward by 65 ADM if those students continue with us. And remember, one ADM is a student who is with us from day 1 to 100. Every day is worth 1% of ADM. So someone enrolls, and 3 days later they withdraw, we get 3% of that ADM. So that's great news, just kind of a historical perspective. When it comes to the 1920 school year compared to the 12th day, on the 12th day we had, let me quickly get it. We had, just about 4,000 head counts. And so pre-COVID year, we're now higher when it comes to head count. And we're actually higher ADM as well.
Yeah, your head count chart for 2019-20 was 3,934 on day 12, according to the figures that you shared with me. So yeah, we're substantially up from where we were pre-COVID. We're almost 100 more students than we were pre-COVID.
Just because I'm curious, do we count the Discovery Garden kids in
our head count?
Yeah, yes,
Yes?
yes.
Yeah, but it's important to note what Brian was saying about ADM. That's something that's not well understood by a lot of folks in the community. That's a number that's a calculation based on our enrollment, but it's not our actual enrollment. For instance, in preschool this year, we have 165 kids enrolled, and we're receiving 12.5 ADM for those 165 students. So when somebody looks at ADM online and says, here's where you were 5 years ago, and here's where you are now, and here's where you are, it's a number that's based on enrollment, but it's not our actual enrollment. And those figures we've only kept for the last 4 years because everything we do is based on ADM. Every principal at every school at any given time knew what their actual head count was, but we haven't tracked and recorded that until the last 4 years.
No, I was just curious because preschool, we only get partial ADM. Don't the
Right.
parents pay?
Correct, they pay tuition.
They pay tuition.
And they've been pretty steady. For example, on day 12 of this year, they had 154 head count, and the year pre-COVID, they had 158. So, yeah, so it's not, there isn't a big variance.
No, I was just curious.
No, it's a very successful program, and we're lucky to have it. And if you look at historical reports online, ADM, because it's really what all of the state reports are ADM. It's our power school system that shows head count. And that's given some criticism I had. Cheryl Belasso, our student information specialist, go back and do the head count for the last 4 years. Even though we hadn't done that data, she can go in and do a query, and for the first 12 days over the last 4 years, do a number-to-number head count calculation so that we have that. But we don't have it every Friday like we have with ADM. But one thing on the reports online, there was a portion of time that kindergarten was funded full. So if it was funded full 1 year, I think it was 2007, I think was the last year, they all counted as one ADM, and then the next year, the state cut it. So it looks like we had 700, no, that's not right. No, that's not, that'd be a whole school of kindergartners. So I'm just kind of doing I don't know, let's just say 200 kindergartners or whatever, then the next year, it would show 100. And so without that context, I'm going to go, wow, they dropped half their kindergarten kids in 1 year. You can look at numbers and skew them any which way you want.
It is important to recognize that enrollment is more complex than a single number.
And we have quite a significance of our families in our neighboring towns that enroll with us in open enrollment. It's a testament to the education we put forth. And also, we are not in a growing town. You know, we're a retirement with not very affordable housing. And just from last year, we're up, over 180 kids compared to the last year. And then last year, compared to the big COVID shutdown year, we were up, 60 kids. So, and from the pre-COVID, we are up.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, it's clear to me that the quality of education in PUSD is attracting kids, families to our district, especially when we look at the last 4 years. And I think it is cause for celebration, pride, however you want to put it, that even from last year, kids are coming to this district.
Yep.
And I do think it's important to talk about those larger zoomed out cycles and perhaps what's happening in our demographics. And so if you could, can we look back 10 years ago? I know we weren't counting heads at that time, so we don't necessarily have the apples to apples, but are we able to maybe make some statements about how we're comparing to where we were 10 years ago, or certain cycles that maybe even like over the last 20 years, like what are we seeing? What are some of those trends? What are some of those events that have happened that have changed enrollment or ADM?
Mr. Tenney did a great analysis on this and provided it to Mrs. Hudson.
Yeah.
And we're going to have like a little question and answer on our website, because we have had major things, the recession being one of them, a change in the law at the state level that really made quite a few, many of our English language learner families, students, go away. And then we also, when it comes to charter schools, I mean, we had one of the more successful charter schools that specifically targets high-achieving districts and goes in and opens up a school, and they have an 800-student school in a new building. So those are those major things over the last 10 years.
To that last factor, I'm curious because you mentioned the calculation that if a student is with you for 100 days, you get the full amount. If they're only
Correct.
with you 3 days, great. This is true for other public schools and charters. It's the same calculation. Do we see any headcount increase after that 100th day?
Absolutely, yes. And
And
just
what
before,
do
and
we-
just before testing.
And why is that?
Charter schools are paid on head count per each month, not over the 100 days. They are not counted in the same way that our kids are counted.
But we see this influx of kiddos
Right.
right before
After
state
the
testing
100th
because
day.
they've been counseled out of certain charters that really depend on those high scores. So we do get students who have been told, we're probably going to have to retain you, so you might consider trying somewhere else.
Right, and we accept every kid every day.
If they're in our
regardless.
boundaries, we absolutely
Right.
do.
Can we collect that data starting this year and see where they're coming from and what the reason was for them coming to us after the 100th day?
Yes?
I think that would be interesting data for us to have in our pockets at least, to understand the reasoning behind it.
We have, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that we're at a point now with the charters in the community where we have a tendency to gain about the same number we lose, that it's about an even split.
Yeah, and the exception to that, again, is typically between day 100 and
Well, the timing is
testing.
bad,
Yeah.
but the numbers are.
But year to year, you're exactly right. It's kind of a revolving door, particularly one charter school in town. There's a couple of them that are kind of doing it right, in my opinion, and there's one that's a for-profit situation that kind of plays the rules. They're not doing anything illegal. I want to be clear about that.
Right.
The legislature has set up the rules such that they've figured it out how they can game that and make the most money, and they do a good job at it.
I think another noteworthy event to talk about is, at one time, North Point
Oh, that's exactly right.
was a Prescott Unified School.
And we broke off from them.
And we, for various reasons, it wasn't working like we planned, and so North Point became its own charter.
Yeah.
And that was a chunk of kiddos.
I think it was 180 at
Yeah,
that
it was almost
time.
200.
Yeah. So there are 4 specific events over the last, I'd say, 15 years that you just look at numbers without that context.
Yeah.
On the report that Clark put together, he indicates that the census data in Prescott indicates that between 2010 and 2020, the years you were talking about, the number of children ages 0 through 19 in Prescott went down by 569 children. We're losing kids. We're losing families with kids. Kids are growing up, they're going away. We aren't pulling in new families.
And interestingly, over that same time period, people talk about Prescott growing. It absolutely is. We grew by
Yeah.
almost 4,000 residents.
People like me.
But while we grew by almost 4,000 residents, yeah, we lost 569 kids.
Do we have numbers on the Ballet Academy? Are they enrolling students at this point?
Not yet.
Not yet,
They
okay,
haven't enrolled anybody yet.
okay.
So,
We have had, and I asked Christina Timchek, who's our PUSD Everywhere Director, and she said we have had some enroll on our PUSD Everywhere online, specifically anticipation of the ballet school
okay,
that were
okay.
new to PUSD.
Okay.
A handful.
Okay,
Great.
great. Anything else on that?
So it's good news.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah,
Thank you,
so
Brian.
enrollment's up. I think we clarified this the last 3 years in a row, each of the last 3 years,
Yes.
including this year where we're up 100 kids plus based on the same time period last year. That's an enormous increase and really bodes well.
Especially considering the demographics.
Yep, yep.
So-
And Brian touched on this. I think it's really important. There's a couple of people in the community who are pulling data from various places on the internet, and they have accurate data, but they have inaccurate context. And so the narrative that they're sharing around that is also inaccurate. We've invited some of those folks to sit down with us and have this kind of discussion. So far, they've declined.
Yeah, I haven't been contacted by a single person about enrollment or budget, period.
Okay. Thank you. COVID?
Well, you know, currently, right now, things are pretty good. We only have 2 current positive students that we know of. As we kind of suspected when everyone came back in August, we did have a little bit of flurry of activity. Community metrics have also been dropping. We tend to see it before it's reflected in the community metrics because we are the community. So right now we just have 2 current positives. We had 1 classroom that we felt like possibly transmission was happening. We implemented other mitigation measures and that ended that. And so not a whole lot to report. I do update the dashboard every week if anyone's interested.
I do have a question, Marty. Is this something we need to continue to have every month on our agenda?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
You know, I'm always willing to answer questions.
Yeah. And I'm
The
not
dashboard's
suggesting,
updated.
yeah, I'm not suggesting we get rid of the dashboard, but I'm just thinking
Yeah.
it may not rise to the level of need to have it on every.
The thing that's very nice now is with this new strain and kind of what we've learned over the last couple of years, the isolation period is down to 5 days. And a lot of times families don't know that it's happening until a couple days have passed. So really, students aren't missing more than, 3 days. Sometimes if they happen to figure it out on a Monday, they might miss the whole week. But it's, that part has been nice, that kids aren't out of school so long, and staff.
Okay.
And we're not quarantining close contacts anymore?
We are not quarantining close contacts. We feel like families know the risk. They have the option now to get vaccinated all the way down to the littles, and
We have our online program if they
we have our
choose.
online program if they still have concerns, and we haven't had any complaints that I know of regarding that.
Thank you. All right, next item is the policy services advisories.
I've been carrying around this book of policies.
This is where Marty
everywhere I
lost
go.
the arm wrestling match. so.
I'll just go over both. One is regarding, it's a policy based on Jake's Law, and that is providing if a school refers a student for further mental health evaluation and they're uninsured or underinsured, there's some funding available to the family. Somehow our counselors knew about this when it passed right away, and they were calling me way before we got this advisory. So our counselors are already implementing these kind of services to our students. So that one is pretty self-explanatory. As I mentioned at the Humboldt Combination Board meeting, there's kind of 3 categories for this big policy advisory. One is transparency and parents' rights. One category is health and COVID, and the other category is really kind of operations and curriculum. I can mention just maybe 3 of them that I think we'll be doing some work around, or we can talk about at the second read. Talk about it later.
Yeah, but if you would
Oh,
mention
okay.
them now, that'd be good.
So one that we'll be taking a close look at as schools is the student surveys. There's just some changes to what students can be surveyed about, so we just want to make sure our staff knows about it. Honestly, I I think the changes make sense. I think it's what parents want, and it just talks about you can't survey about a student's mental health or their medical history or gun ownership or, some of those things that may be considered private information for families. So we'll just make sure staff understands those parameters.
And just clarification, that would be any surveys that would be implemented by any school staff. For example, for my science fair project, I surveyed fellow students on
It
certain
doesn't really
topics.
apply to polls.
Right.
I would say if you're polling someone on what's your favorite ice cream flavor.
But what if I'm polling them on one of these topics and I'm a student?
It doesn't really talk about students.
It doesn't apply to students. The
doesn't,
other
yeah.
piece is if they're anonymous, none of those things apply. Now, we don't want to be doing polls around those things, or surveys around those things anyway. So we'll certainly do some training with our principals and our teachers about, hey, let's be even, we've always been cautious about this. Let's be even more cautious because there's people who have a heightened concern around this. So we'll be even more cautious. But the net effect, as Marty's suggesting, is probably very minimal because, again, it specifically says within the law, if you're talking about an anonymous survey, one to which they don't apply their name, you can still ask about those very same things, which we haven't generally asked about in the past at all and won't going forward.
Okay. The other one is, we just kind of talked about September 11th, some education around September 11th, what it means, what happened. We've already been doing that at most of our schools, so it's not a big change, but it's I think a good addition to our curriculum. And the last one I would just mention is the 1 to 2 minutes of a moment of silence. And our schools have already been implementing that. 1 minute for those little guys is a long time. And we can't, the law specifically says we can't advise them as to what they're supposed to be doing during that time. So we have sent some information home, I think especially at the elementary level, about what is this moment of silence, and maybe you talk to your child about what you want them to do during that time. Otherwise, most of it, even the parent rights and transparency piece, we already do. We give tours of schools, we allow visitors. We want parents involved, and they can ask for any records or information about their child. So most of it really doesn't change anything we're doing.
Okay. If there are other items you'd like to have discussed, the many, many pages of that was in your board brief, your board book. So we can bring those up next time, okay? Next item is community comments. Anybody have anything?
I had met with one community member, and I've referred him back to, I think, Kelsey and Marty and Joe, but he wanted to meet again. I've made an outside referral, but in any case, he's interested in some of the social studies curriculum and wanting to look at specifically potentially a Black History Museum in the city somewhere. And so that was something I wanted to bring forward and just let you know that that discussion is happening with me. I've made referrals not only to the district, but also to an outside agency to help with that. But that may be something that, as we have community comment on that curriculum, that may come up. So just a heads up for you.
Other comments? I had a comment from a citizen who was concerned that he did not feel we had appropriately posted the agenda for our special meeting following our meeting with HUSD board. I have visited with him personally. I believe we have come to an understanding, but I will tell you that we don't hold special meetings willy-nilly, that because it is difficult to get the message out to the public that we have those meetings. And yet, once in a great while, we encounter something where it has to be done before our next meeting, and so we do go ahead and post it. It was posted appropriately, but if anyone is interested in accessing postings that don't appear on the yearly standard list of our meetings, please feel free to call the district office and we can walk you through how to access those. So, anything else? All right, future agenda items? / the COVID. All right, our next meeting date is Tuesday, October 4th at 5 o'clock, right here. So, we are adjourned.
Yippee.